Suzanne, your vote?
Yes.
Suzanne? Sorry, Nancy?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
And do we have anyone online?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. That brings us to student report with Ms. Clevis.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Clevis, your school committee student representative, and I have an important announcement to share with you all. After the end of Q2, I will be leaving school for a semester-long opportunity, and I will return in early June, which means that I will not be able to present in front of all of you lovely folks for a decent amount of time. And the lovely senior Alice McGarvey-Thompson will be taking over in my stead until her graduation. Just like to say that so far this school year, I've had the distinct honor and privilege of giving members of the Brookline community and elsewhere a view into what it is like to be a student at BHS. From highlighting recent renovations and Powerpuff Games and student artistry, to presenting about serious issues such as toxic gas incidents, bigoted graffiti, and our supportive measures bill, I've gotten the chance to reflect on the nature of my position and the responsibilities that have been vested in me as school committee student representative. Providing an honest representation of our lives at school is something I don't take lightly. To me, presenting the school's prides and pitfalls is something I don't want to do, but have an obligation to do. Keeping this balance in mind has been essential to my work thus far, and it's a balance I think is necessary in order to do my job well. I have complete faith in Alice to fill in this position, as she has proved herself a master of this balance. Alice is buoyant, intelligent, kind, and dedicated to her work, not only as an activist, but as a student council member. Having served for 2 years now, getting to work with her has been incredibly rewarding, and I'm proud to call her a friend. She's a perfect fit for the job, and I know that the Brookline community will be convinced of this as the months go by. And now, folks, I give you Alice.
Okay, it's good. Okay, okay. Hi everyone. I'm Alice McGarvey-Thompson. She, her. I just want to really thank Laura for everything she's done in this position and for really helping me with this transition. And I'm just super grateful for all her hard work. Okay, so a bit about me. I'm a senior at BHS. I'm on student council. I'm in SWS. I'm really passionate about housing justice, and I'm pretty involved in the town politics around that. I have a younger brother, and I live in Washington Square. I ran for this position because I want the people who are making policy for students to be able to see the impact of those policies from those students' perspectives. My goal for my time as student representative is to work with the school committee to actually address issues that are impacting us. To be transparent, my biggest priority coming into this is anti-racist and racial justice work at BHS and the school district. There are a lot of things going on right now that I want to share with you and work on with you. I want student voice to be the driving force in all of my presentations. I plan to bring in many guests, read you statements and opinions from students, and do a lot of interviewing, surveying, and outreach. I hope I can act as a middleman, a representative of students, as well as bringing in other voices. I'm serious about this position, and I'm invested in this work. I want ongoing collaboration with the school committee, not just to talk for a few minutes a month. For example, last year my peers and I worked with Val Frias and Steve Ehrenberg because we were frustrated that METCO parents can't serve on school committee or vote in school committee elections. I hope that we can continue efforts similar to that during my time. I have so many things I want to talk about and so many people that I want to bring on to talk to you. I promise that I'm going to bring really important issues to you and work on them together. And I'm really looking forward to learning what questions you have and working with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for joining us, Ms. McGarvey-Thompson. And thank you for the introduction you provided to her, Ms. Cleves and Clevis, and for everything that you've done up to this point in terms of your student reports. They've been extremely informative. We're definitely going to miss you and look forward to your return in June. And in the meantime, we look very much forward to learning more from you about what's taking place at the high school and also having that collaborative relationship that you just described. Anything further from either of you?
I think I'm good. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. So that, any other comments?
I just wanted to say, Laura, it was such a pleasure having you. It doesn't matter. Thank you for everything. Thank you for your bravery. Thank you for always being honest and not just reporting things that were, popular. You did a marvelous job. It was a pleasure working with you, and I know we're going to see some very amazing things coming when you come back. Enjoy your, is it a semester abroad? Is that what you're doing?
It's a semester in Washington, D.C.
Oh my God, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you. Well, have a great time. Go get them and then bring it back.
All right, so that brings us to our next item, which is the superintendent's report. Dr. Guillory?
Good evening and Happy New Year to all. We're going to jump right into it, and I'm going to try to do this without coughing too much. Our update for this week includes athletics, an update on athletics, community health update, some important dates, and then updates on the school visits, as well as our spotlight on excellence. We want to share and congratulate the BHS boys ice hockey team for winning the Middlebury tournament in Vermont last Thursday, December 29th. Congratulations also to the members of the BHS girls swim and dive team for receiving 5 all-scholastic honors from the fall 2022 season from the Boston Herald. So congratulations to both of those teams. For our community health update, since returning from winter vacation, PSB has seen 46 positive cases that have been reported across the district in the 7-day period from Friday, December 30th through Thursday, January 5th. PSB continues to be a mask-friendly district, and we welcome staff and students to consider wearing masks as we return from our winter holiday break, knowing that upper respiratory illnesses, including colds, the flu, and COVID-19 are still prevalent within our community. Getting vaccinated continues to be the primary way to limit serious complications from the flu and COVID-19. In December, the CDC, as you know, approved bivalent COVID-19 boosters for individuals 6 months and older. PSB and the town continue to hold flu and COVID-19 clinics over the next few months. The next flu vaccine will be held at the Baker School Monday, January 9th from 4 to 6 p.m. And we will possibly extend that to 7 p.m. if these times fill up. So that's an important note that we will extend if need be there. Some important dates on the horizon. Monday, January 16th is the MLK or Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. Lunar New Year is Sunday, January 22nd. The term 2 ends for 6th through 12th grade, Friday, January 27th. And our International Holocaust Remembrance Day is Friday, January 27th as well. And for recently completed school visits, I had the opportunity to visit actually all the schools prior to the winter recess, but my longer visits were at Ridley, BHS, and Pierce prior to the break, and then I spent some time at Baker this morning in their middle school, mainly in 8th grade. I hit a couple of 7th grade classrooms there. Again, so many students and teachers, faculty and staff are all excited to be back working with our students, making great things happen each and every day. Tomorrow I will be visiting BEEP, and then in the upcoming, next week, BHS, Heath, and Lawrence again. And these are opportunities for me to do direct work with our building leaders, our building principals, as well as their coaching, their feedback cycles, and those types of things. So getting immersed deeply into what's happening in the schools. And with that, we're going to turn the spotlight on excellence tonight to the Runkle School. This evening, we are proud to shine the spotlight on excellence on the Runkle School mock trial team. As part of the Discovering Justice program, middle school students from Runkle met after school throughout the fall, learning about the judicial system. In December, they persuasively presented their case in Brookline District Court, just across the street from us, led by Runkle parents, including Jonathan Simpson from the town council's office. The students were thoughtful and inquisitive at every stage of the process and are to be commended for representing the public schools of Brookline with integrity and honor. I will turn the microphone over to Principal Finnegan. She will introduce Mr. Simpson and some of the Runkle School mock trial team members who have joined us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Guillory, and thank you, school committee, for giving us time tonight. And I also want to say hi to Alice, who went to Runkle. I'm very proud of you. Happy to see you there. I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan Simpson, who was the parent who ran the mock trial group here at Runkle. And this is the second year in a row that we have had Runkle parents run this program. It's our hope that we can turn it over to teachers in the coming years. But if it weren't for the supportive parents that we have at Runkle, this program would not happen. And I was able to serve as a juror for the mock trial at the Brookline District Court. And it is an amazing opportunity to see what our students can do. And it just gives me great hope for the future, because I know that these are going to be incredible leaders someday. So I will hand it over to Jonathan, who will introduce the three representatives here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal Finnegan. Hello, everyone. As Dr. Guillory said, I'm Jonathan Simpson. I'm one of the associate town councils here for the town, but I'm also a Runkle parent. And luckily for me, the one of the legal mentors for the Runkle mock trial team. This is our second semester doing it. We did it last spring when we were the Runkle mock appeal team. And this fall, we were the Runkle mock trial team, because the way the program does it is you do a mock trial in the fall with a jury, who among our jurors was Principal Finnegan. But I'm happy to report we also had a great community turnout to serve on the jury. We had town meeting members, we had the chair of the select board, we had Runkle parents. It was really, really great. And then in the spring, you do a mock appeal in front of a panel of judges. So I want to say thank you to Principal Finnegan, to Vice Principal Castellana, to Ms. Crocker, who helped us, let us use her room, to Ms. Murphy, who helped us with the technology. But I really don't want to take any more time, not just because I'm unfortunately one of the COVID cases that Dr. Keller just cited, because I'm struggling right now, but I also want to really shout out, give the time to the students, because they're really the heart and soul of this program. And so today we have Xavier Dupuis, 7th grader at Runkle, as well as Daphne Spunt, an 8th grader, and Natan Shapiro, an 8th grader, each of whom is going to talk a little bit about what they learned with the program. So, why don't we start with you, Xavier?
Well, my name is Xavier and I go to Runkle School. And I'm in 7th grade. So before this, I'd never been in a courtroom. And so it was a really cool experience to see just the judge, the judge sitting on the bench and where the jury was placed and the seats behind it. But it was also a great time for the prep before the trial. And I had a really fun time working with the other students in the mock trial class. I learned some new stuff about the Fourth Amendment, and I hope I can do the mock appeal in the spring. I think that will be fun. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Xavier. So Daphne, why don't you go next?
Hello, everyone. My name is Daphne. I'm a student at Runkle School. My experience in mock trial was very positive because it was fun and I learned a lot. I originally joined mock trial because it was an activity my mom enjoyed when she was my age. I had lots of background knowledge about the judicial system, but through the program, I was able to gain a deeper understanding and insight of debating. Once I felt confident in my argument for the trial, I was thrown a curveball. I was originally arguing for the plaintiff, but the defendant was short a person, so I argued for both sides, which was a very interesting experience to be the devil's advocate for myself. I learned about the court system's trial organization and how judges and juries interpret laws and amendments. The specific case I was involved in focused on the Fourth Amendment search and seizure. So I learned how to challenge interpretations and make my own. But what mock trial focused on was each part of the trial, like cross-questioning and opening statements. Everyone learned a lot about what each part was and how to write that specific part of the trial. Preparing my questions and statements for the judge was challenging, but it was a learning experience on how to be concise, address judges, brainstorm arguments, and how to back up your own side. I think how I learned the most was by being able to question everything we were taught about the trial and figure out the flaws in our judicial system. I was able to do that because everyone could ask the mentors questions about the courts in general that didn't have to do with our specific trial. So I took a lot away from that. But by far my favorite part of the mock trial program was going to court and showing what I had learned. I felt very prepared, but also nervous. We had plenty of time to write our parts with the adults in charge. And in the end, I think myself and others improved on public speaking. And it was also very cool to meet a real judge and be in a court environment, which added to the experience. I know a lot of students came into the program not sure if they would have a good time or get anything out of it, but I can confidently say that everyone learned and did really well during the trial. So overall, I would definitely recommend the program to those wanting to learn more about our judicial system and get better at advocating and defending sides. That's all. Thank you.
Great job, Daphne. And I do really want to commend Daphne and her teammate Ben Shapiro for doing exactly what she said and stepping into an additional role at kind of the last minute when we had a student unable to make the final mock trial. So our final student today is Natan Shapiro, who I've been lucky enough to work with not just this semester, but last semester as well.
Hello. I apologize in advance for my poor camera quality, but there's really nothing I can do about it. So my name is Natan Shapiro, as Jonathan said. I joined mock trial this fall, simply because I had done mock appeal last spring in 2022, and I really enjoyed it. I think by far the best part was the legal mentors. The Discovering Justice curriculum for the mock trial was pretty comprehensive, but it missed out on some parts. And just being able to constantly ask questions of the legal mentors was really great. So for example, we're talking about the jury system because every trial has a jury. And I asked the legal mentors a bunch of questions about the jury system and started to realize it's not as perfect as I previously thought it was. Turns out it has quite a lot of flaws, and I'm really glad I got to examine them in this program, even if it wasn't part of the curriculum. Just generally, the legal mentor shared new perspectives, and it really deepened my understanding of legal system and just debating and public speaking skills in general. I also enjoyed working with the other kids like Daphne and Xavier to perfect my arguments. And then I'd go home after school and do that some more, even though it wasn't required because it was really fun. One thing to note is, so I did mock appeal last spring. I really enjoyed that. And I think I gained a lot from mock trial, which I did not expect. I was thinking, oh, I did mock appeal in the spring, it's just going to be a repeat. But not only is a jury trial very different from an appellate court, but I think just I asked more questions and I did things differently, and that was really great. As Daphne said, I would completely recommend this to anyone. It was a really great experience for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natan. Thank you everyone for your time. And I did want to just echo Natan's appreciation for my fellow legal mentors, Mark Josephs, Josh Dupuis, and Susan Howard, as well as our parent, Rebecca White Shapiro, who was our sort of a parent, stepped into the role of our teacher coordinator, was a parent coordinator for us and really made all the wheels keep turning. So thank you everyone for your time. We really appreciate it. And thank you again to Principal Finnegan for her support of this program.
Thank you so much, John. I find it fascinating that none of the students talked about the trial being about a principal in the Fourth Amendment.
Well, we did
And the
get
inappropriate search and seizure of lockers and cell phones.
we did have some concerns, some concerned students for the plaintiff that said, how can we possibly have a principal on the jury if we're suing a school district for a principal's behavior? But we were able to roll with it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for explaining your experience with moot court. It sounds like a lot of you really gained a lot from the experience, and it was great to hear your reflections upon it. Are there any comments from members of the school committee or questions? Jennifer?
I just wanted to say how appreciative I am to the whole school community and the parent community to support this program. And I love hearing from the students. I'm always so impressed by how well-spoken the students are and the amazing ideas that they're sharing and the passions that they're developing and the interests they're developing. So I'm so excited. This is great. And thank you all for all of your hard work.
Anyone else? Suzanne?
Yeah, I also want to say thank you. And I also want to say it's just a wonderful opportunity to expose students to the wider world out there. I mean, that's where you learn about what excites you, where you might want to go someday and study, what opportunities are out there. Maybe you learn you would never be able to do that or wouldn't want to. I mean, and so every chance our students have to go out and experience the world, right? Authentic learning, as we talk about, is a real plus. So thank you very much, Principal Finnegan. I really appreciate your support for this program. And thank you to all the volunteers and to the students.
So on behalf of the Public Schools of Brookline, the Spotlight on Excellence is awarded to Runkle School Discovering Justice Mock Trial Team for successfully presenting your case before the Brookline District Court and honorably representing Runkle School and the Public Schools of Brookline. Signed by myself as well as Chair Perlman, and we want to acknowledge you all again for your hard work.
All right, you are welcome to stay with us if you like, but we also understand if you want to move on with your evenings. And thank you very much for joining us and sharing your experiences. Are there any questions for Dr. Guillory about the earlier portion of the superintendent's report? All right, seeing none, we can now move to public comment. And no one has signed up for public comment. That's all right. So we will now move to presentations and discussions of current issues, presentation of school improvement plans, and we will be beginning with the BEAT program.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, everyone. It's great to see you. Margaret Eberhardt, interim principal for BEAP. I'm excited to present our school improvement plan this evening to you. I can start sharing my screen. That's okay. Let's see. All right. So here's a presentation of our school improvement plan. These are the members of our site council. We have a few parent members and we have a few, a teacher, Nikki Farrington, two specialists, Andrea Schutler and Laura Scheinman, who are a social speech and language pathologist and a PT, in addition to Ned Syllabus, Nate Tucker, and Kelsey Mello, who are our parent representatives. This is a 2-year plan that we approved back in September of 2021. We did adapt the plan to include a goal on our facilities and program planning. So that will be what you see here. We did think about the budgetary impact of our school improvement plan, and it basically has 3 things for you to consider. The plan includes consideration for extending BEAP school day to be a school day and the personnel costs associated with increasing the FTEs for teachers and paraprofessionals. That's an approximate cost, but we just wanted to have that in the realm for you to consider as we think about that in the future. We have some non-personnel costs, which are purchasing curriculum materials needed to improve classroom environments, and also some professional learning costs related to curriculum resources and books and materials for educators. So the first school improvement plan, school improvement goal that we just adopted in December is the facilities and program plan that I presented to you back in October. And basically, it's the same plan, same plan that we presented in October. It includes a longer day for BEAP and access to extended day programming at all of our locations. And so we are monitoring this goal as we prepare to move into the Driscoll School in September of 2023. We're very excited about that. We are working with the extended day program at Driscoll to make sure that we have access to the program in September. We are planning on opening 3 classrooms, and then we are working with Maculus and facilities to make a transition plan for BEAP to move out of Clark Road in fiscal year 25. So a year and a half from now, Clark Road will close, and we will need to have a plan for where to put the 10 BEAP staff and the 2 additional classrooms that are at Clark Road. Our second school improvement goal has to do with equity and access. And this goal addresses two issues. It addresses our desire to reach the most number of students that we can who want to access BEEP but perhaps can't afford to, and also to increase our anti-bias and anti-racist educational goals and our programming. So you can see how we're monitoring this goal. We are really developing policies and procedures that allow us to identify students who might not be able to afford BEEP, who need financial assistance, and we are identifying ways to help them apply to BEEP. So we had 2 application days at housing recently. We've had 2 parent presentations, and I'll be happy to report to all of you that since I presented to you in October, we've enrolled 3 additional students who live in housing and in the shelters in town. And we continue to work on our equity goals with Janae Utaro and Hey Young Kao. And we had some professional development and some work in the district, along with some work in a grant that we received to attend the Teachers College's Reimagining Education Institution back in the summer. And our last school improvement goal has to do with our social emotional learning goal. We've worked really hard to prioritize social emotional learning over the last 2 or 3 years in BEEP. And we have been proud to say that we have implemented program-wide our second step curriculum that has been very successful. And in addition, we have been screening students and monitoring them through the Panorama tool that provided through Matt Dubois. And we're really enhancing our parent engagement through parent workshops, opportunities for parents to get together. One of the best parts of this year is that we've had real opportunities to gather in person at BEEP locations. So that is basically an update on our goals. Not much has changed, and we are thinking forward about what our goals are going to be like next year, and we're going to add some curriculum goals around ELA and math. And that's all that I have for you right now. I can stop sharing if you'd like to ask any questions.
Are there any questions? All right, so one question that I have from your presentation, your first slide, you mentioned a goal including an extended day programming partnership.
Yes.
Wondering if you could talk a little more about that and where that currently stands?
So in terms of Driscoll or in terms of overall partnerships?
Overall partnerships?
So we are very happy to say that we have existing partnerships for Schools for Children, which is at Lynch and our Partingham sites. And we have existing partnerships with Heath Extended Day, which operates out of our Clark Road location. So we are able to offer extended day at Lynch, at Partingham, and at Clark Road. And in addition, we offer extended day through our partnerships through the Trust Center at the Beacon Street location. So we are working with Driscoll, and Megan has been fantastic, the director for the extended day program at Driscoll. We are already planning to offer that in September of 2023. So we've made great strides in that area. And I'm proud to say that the Schools for Children and the Clark Road Heath accept vouchers for extended day.
All right, thank you very much for those added details. Any other questions or comments? Andy.
Hi, Margaret.
Hi, nice to see you.
Yeah, likewise. So you mentioned, I think on the first slide, the $700,000 estimate for the personnel costs associated with making the school day longer. Are you thinking that this would allow also an increase in like tuition paying enrollment
Yes,
that would partly
exactly.
offset that cost? So
Yes.
what are you thinking right now the net cost to PSB would be?
So that's a good question. We've actually sort of figured out in a working document what the distribution would cost would be in terms of the revolving fund and versus the general fund, but I haven't solidified that enough to say exactly what that would be and what the tuition would be. That would be a conversation with the school committee to determine what we would charge to reflect the increase in time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our next step, to think about what we would increase the revolving fund to reflect the increase in time.
Mm-hmm. So it would be both an increase in the number of kids we could enroll or attract and possibly an increase in the tuition that we
Right.
charge.
Exactly. And it would also allow us opportunities to provide a longer day services for children, which would help with our special education programming as well.
All right. Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Stephen?
Thanks. Thanks for that presentation, Margaret.
You're welcome.
And when we last talked,
Yes.
you told us about your vision for BEEP, which involved a presence in every school.
Mhm.
What in your SIP is going to help get you there, other than the 3 classrooms at Driscoll with extended day? Is there anything in here
Oh,
that?
yeah. So we haven't, so part of this was just a plan for this year. If you
Yeah.
remember that, we need to work on and approve a plan that goes forward. So Matt and I are working on looking at spaces that are available within current school buildings that we might be able to move into as we move those 2 additional Clark Road classrooms out of that building. So that's the long-term plan. I didn't add that to this plan because we haven't completely solidified that. And I also didn't address that with the site council because that's like a next year plan. But we definitely are, one of the things the site council did ask is that we have a working group and a liaison with the district to make sure that we can make that plan a reality.
Okay, I guess I just would reiterate that I think it's a fair characterization of the school committee that we were unanimous.
Oh, 100%. Yes. No. It's just a matter of finding the space, to be honest with you. It's a matter of thinking about where those spaces might be as enrollment changes and processes. So for sure, we will make that. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Suzanne?
Yeah, hi, thank you, David. Thank you, Margaret. I just wonder if you want to put a plug in for registration. Your program is so wonderful. And,
Yes,
I think
so
it's,
much.
yeah, just could you put a plug in what people should do?
You are. So enrollment, registration goes until January 15th. Please, you can register up until January 15th, at which point we will close registration for the academic year and then for the next academic year. And then we will begin compiling a wait list. If you have any questions about registration, you can call the BEEP office and we will be happy to help you. We will happy help you fill out the application. Like I said, we held some on-site application days and they went really, really well. And we actually had a good number so far. I think around 250 applications at this time. And that's a really good number. So
That was my next question. How's enrollment going?
So we don't know. We know the applications, but we won't know until placement until after we do the lottery and stuff. But the applications are looking good.
So they should call the BEEP office if they have questions.
Yes, 713-5471, or you can email beep@psbma.org.
I think you have to say it one more time slowly.
Keep BEEP, BEEP @psbma.org.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I always forget to advertise.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's an honor. Have a good night.
You too. That now brings us to presentation of the school improvement plan for the Florida Ruffin Ridley School. Ms. Bueller?
Hi, everyone. It's good to see you. Thanks so much for inviting me here to review the highlights of our school improvement plan. Let me go ahead and get that going for you. Right, so you have the full copy of our school improvement plan. I'm just going to go through the highlights because it is quite extensive. We have, it is a 3-year plan that we voted in. We're currently in year 2 of the plan, and we monitor and update all the different action steps related to each of the goals with our school council. Our school council includes several different family members from the Ruffin Ridley School Committee, a community member, and several staff members. We have 5 a big robust plan for a big school. So we have 5 goals that support the student social, emotional, and academic growth and achievement, as well as support educator growth and development and community wellness. And I linked the full plan, which is available on our website. And I know that you all have that there as well. There's pretty minimal budgetary impact in our school improvement plan this year and in the 3 years as a whole. Some of the budgetary things to highlight are that I did do some budgetary enhancement requests to look at targeted professional development in an as-needed basis. So this would be different than professional development costs that get funded by the Brookline Education Foundation. So really looking at when teachers have students that raise needs or different things that they would like professional development in the moment, we want to be able to have some funds to meet those needs. And we also want to work on strengthening our child study teams and the different resources that we have available that support Tier 1 and Tier 2 academic and social emotional interventions. And I imagine we would be doing this in partnership with a lot of the CST review work that's currently happening within the district as well. And one of the other things that we are trying to do this year and in the coming years is really looking at our paraprofessional schedules for efficiency and making sure that we're utilizing and training our paraprofessionals so that we can create more opportunities for different interventions, specifically looking at some clinical interventions as well. So I'm going to kind of gloss over the first goal, which is really around the physical health and safety of our students, staff, and families. And I'll spend the most of the time talking more about the other goals. So this is really just in our, we have a goal that lives in our school improvement plan, really of the pandemic and just kind of monitoring and making sure that we're listening to all of the different public health advice and information that's out there and making sure we're adjusting any procedures that we have within the school to adapt to all of that changing guidance. And so we monitor this and we work with our nurses and Tricia Laham in the district. Our second goal is around student mental and social emotional health and wellness. So we really have been noticing two big things coming on the heels of the pandemic is that we have students who have lagging skills just because of the amount of time that we were out of school and where they were and what they were doing during that time. And then we also have a lack of opportunity for social connection during that time as well. And so this idea of these lagging skills married with the inability to practice some of those skills mean that we have to do a little bit more explicit teaching. And so we have this school that lives here to make sure that we are doing all that we can to both teach the explicit skills and then also give students time to practice those skills. So just a few of the different action items that I pulled out was some of the work that we've been doing around operationalizing the PSB Code of Conduct and how it relates to some of the different behaviors and emotional regulation and things that we're seeing at our school. Looking about how we built our schedule this year, which offers 4 times a week of SEL instruction, 5 times a week in the lower grades, in K-5, 4 times in middle school. And then really making sure that we're increasing and allocating resources to address some of the rising mental health needs that we're seeing in our school. Our third goal is around equity. So we've been working in partnership as well with Janae and Hayoung to do some of the work around anti-racist teaching practice and social justice work as we look to dismantle some of the systems of oppression that exist within our school system and within our school community. And what that's looked like, a couple of the action steps that I pulled out of this goal to highlight was really some of the work that our middle school teams did in the summertime and that they're doing all across this throughout the school year is looking at our advisory and making sure that we have all of our lessons address topics of identity, community, and digital media literacy. And so that's a working group of educators who developed some lessons, looked at what resources we had within the district and then how to use those and create new ones if we needed them. And then in concert with what's happening in the middle school and K-2, we have a group of educators that participate in our access and equity team that have been aligning different lessons and ideas with the Learning for Justice standards. And so they've been doing that work and rolling it out. Mostly in our second grade has been working a lot with some of those lessons and trying them out and then thinking about how we can broaden access to them in K-1 and 2. And then another piece of equity that we're also looking at is around summer programming and some of the barriers that have historically existed in our school community with access to some of that programming. And so I just had a great conversation with Michelle Herman today, and we'll pull a group together to really talk about all the different summer programs that are offered in Brookline and to make sure that all of our students have equitable access to that programming. Our fourth goal is really around, I realize that I'm speaking in terms that might not always work. So our in the last slide you saw SCCC, which is the School Culture and Climate Committee, and that is where our Access and Equity team lives. Our fourth goal is around teaching and learning. So looking at all of the different instructional strategies that we have to be able to utilize and strengthen those to make sure that we are being culturally responsive in our approaches to instruction and making sure that all of our students have entry points into grade level content so that they can continue to experience growth and achievement. A few of the action items that I pulled out of for this goal that we've been working on really hard this year have been around identifying, developing, and supporting a system and procedure for collecting, analyzing, and monitoring and responding to student growth and achievement data. What that's looked like has been and it's kind of connected to this next action item, was to make sure that we created a schedule where educators would have time within the school day, within the work day, outside of their prep time, where they could meet and work with our coaches and our specialists and myself and the vice principals to really look at data and instruction and think about what they're seeing in real time and how we might plan for different interventions or extensions. Or anything else that the data might be showing us and how we can in real time respond to it rather than waiting longer cycles of time. And so we were able to build a schedule this year and work out times so that our educators, all of our classroom teachers have half an hour once a week to meet with either an FRR administrator to talk about some of the things that are going on, or to meet with coaches and specialists to talk about academic data. The clinical team is also available during that time to meet with our educators to also talk about some of the social emotional stuff that educators might be dealing with as well. The last goal in our school improvement plan is around professional growth for all of our educators. So that's just committing to making sure that all of our educators have the professional growth and development that they need. And so this is kind of tied to that first slide where I talked about the budget a little bit. And so we just want to make sure that we are providing the professional development that teachers are telling us that they need, rather than guessing and thinking about what they might need, but really responding to what they're asking for. And then some of also in the professional development goal is really an importance of building strong educator teams. And so taking some of that team meeting time really to do some intentional team building amongst the grade level teams and between the grade level teams. Saeed and I have been working on really building out our middle school team. So protecting some time for all of grades 6 to 8. For our grade 6 to 8 educators to meet together to talk about things like advisory and what's happening in middle school as a whole and kind of what do we want to see happen in middle school. And then really thinking again in concert with the work that's happening in the district around the child study team, how do we strengthen and expand our child study team so that we're really able to meet the needs of all the different students that we have in our school. So that is a really fast version of what we have going on in our school improvement plan. It's a really big plan, definitely open to any questions that you might have, or if as you read through it, you have follow-up questions after this meeting, I'm happy to talk more about those as well.
Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, David. Hi, Jennifer. Great to see you again.
Hi.
I think we all really enjoyed visiting Ridley last month, by the way, for the PTO coffee and talking to families there. That was really nice. I did have a question, just whether you could talk in a little more detail about the second item on the budgetary impact slide. So the analyze para schedules for efficiency and create opportunities to increase tier 1 and 2 clinical interventions. I'm just trying to begin to understand what this means. Like, what would be an example of an inefficient para schedule that could be made more efficient in a way that has a budgetary impact?
Yeah, I'm thinking about, I actually think the budgetary impact is more around, I think a lot about how we're utilizing our general education paraprofessionals, not so much of our special education paraprofessionals, but I'm sure we could look at efficiencies there as well. But in terms of all of our K and 1 paraprofessionals, how we're using them in the classroom, we really want to look at what their schedules look like and maybe being able to provide them professional development. And if we have to provide, if we do provide them professional development, are we compensating, is it our coaches doing that after school hours? Like, how is that getting done? And like, where is that professional development happening? Some of it could potentially happen on some of those early release days or during collab time. Collab time's a little bit trickier because we don't necessarily direct that time, but wanting to think about what budgetary impact could happen if we needed to look at some professional development for our paraprofessionals was more of what I was thinking. I'm sorry if that wasn't totally
I see. So not primarily about scheduling really, but about offering more training as appropriate.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think there is some scheduling stuff too, right? If you have, let's say you have a group of first graders in 3 different classrooms, there's 3 different groups of first graders, all maybe like a group of 2 who are working on some similar skill building things. Does it make sense for 3 different paraprofessionals to be doing the same thing 3 different times? Or could we put a group of 6 together where one person could be working with that and then we could redeploy the other paraprofessionals to be doing something else or some other like level of intervention? We actually played around with this a little bit way back when I first started, maybe like 7 or 8 years ago. It was definitely in the old building, so it was quite a while ago, where we had something similar in kindergarten, where we did some intervention group work across classrooms, and we were able to utilize staff in a different sort of way. And so we have a curiosity of, is that something that worked really well then? And if so, is that something we could scale, bring back and use our paraprofessionals in a different way now that we have paraprofessionals in all of our classrooms again?
Okay, so the more highly trained people are, the more efficient you can be in matching sort of paraprofessionals to student needs.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Mariah.
Hi, Jen. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Hi, Mariah.
Okay, great. Hi. I want to follow up a little bit on Andy's question, and I apologize, I didn't read the school improvement plan in advance, so it could be in there. On the 2 budgetary impacts, you said basically that you didn't see that they had a big impact. Have you quantified it at all or tried to, or not really?
I'd have to pull up my budget slide, like the one that I was working on earlier. That'll be in the budget book. But in terms of paraprofessionals, that's budget neutral. Like, we're not asking for more paraprofessionals or anything like that. And I think a lot of the training we could do in school, unless we were looking at compensating paraprofessionals to attend staff meetings. That's another piece that we've always talked about too, is that we're often doing all this really great work with a lot of our educators during staff meeting time, but paraprofessionals don't come to staff meetings. And so, like, how do we get some alignment there? And then the other budgetary impact in terms of professional development, the way that I worded that in my enhancement request was really about, like, we're doing it now and we're just kind of we're taking money out of our supply line and using it for workshops. And I would like to make it, I would like to actually capture what we're really doing, rather than, moving things from one line to another.
Thanks. And then my next question, I'm not sure if it's for you. It might be for you or for Linus, but there were several things that you're doing which don't just stop at the FRR door, right? Things like thinking about summer programming equity. So how do things percolate? How do improvements from school improvement plans percolate across schools? Is there like a structured way? Is it unstructured? How does that happen? How do we make sure that those things, go to the other places where they should go? Whether it's that or for example, the other thing you mentioned was about, if I interpreted right, it was basically how to use like a structure for using universal screener data was in there too. So how do those innovations transmit to other buildings?
I mean, I could talk to you, Dr. Guillory. Did you want to talk first? I don't want to talk over you.
So one of the ways is this, what you're seeing right now is the fact that principals are sharing these documents with one another now. We didn't do it this year where we would do a dry run presentation of these in front of others, or we would give each other feedback on it. The principals have, interestingly enough, this year adopted a model where on our principal meeting days, they have an hour to themselves to sort of talk about their work or share best practices, or their work as leaders in the organization. So there are opportunities that are, I would say, are the seedlings for this type of work, but our goal is to become more intentional about these better and next practices being shared out.
Yeah, and I would just add that some of, so the conversation that our access and equity team brought up about access to summer programming is something that we've noticed at our school. Our access and equity team has also been in conversations with people at the Lincoln School. And then my job is now to like take it to the people at the district level to talk about, is it just an us thing, or is it a more district-wide thing, and how could we solve it and work together on that? So I think that's where my next step is to make sure that people who are, talking to my principal colleagues, but then also talking to people at the district level helps feed all of that.
But just to that point, like, your group is talking about it and then the issue gets elevated, but it seems like maybe people are identifying the same problem, like, so making sure that it's happening even before then. And I know we've been talking about it too, but thank you.
Suzanne?
Yeah, thank you, David. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate this. And also I have to say to everybody's being very quick and timely, so efficient with their time. So thank you. Well, the thing I got most excited about was when I heard about your grade band meetings. And so I had just a few questions about that. Is that happening K to 5, or what grades are doing that?
K to 8.
K to 8. Well, 6 to 8 is fairly easy to
Yeah.
Is that true with scheduling? But K to 5 is a little trickier. Not so
Scheduling is always,
tricky. Yeah.
that's the, if you could be really, really great at scheduling, you could probably do it all, right? I know I see Jamie's here too, and I know she's like a scheduling guru. But I think, scheduling it for 6 to 8, scheduling a common time off is a little bit easier because we have that conservatory block when all of 6 to 8 goes to conservatory. So it's a little bit easier in the way that we've blocked middle school scheduling. It was a feat to find a common 30-minute block outside of a common planning time, outside of a prep time for educators. It was quite challenging to find that time.
So is this your first year doing that across the board? You've been doing.
Yep. When we were split, we were able to do a little bit of it. But we had our staffing models were really different when we were split as a school. This is the first time we've been able to pull it off, I think, K to 8, since we've all been back together.
So it's near and dear to my heart, and I think it's a really valuable use of time. So I would love for you, Jen, just to take notes at times and maybe report back at some point. I'd love to hear how it's going, and how your teachers are feeling about it, how it's impacting teaching and learning for the students. And if it's not, I'd love to hear that too, because I just would like to hear how it's going. I think it's a great opportunity for teachers to work together to make a difference for our children in the learning. So thank you for your efforts for that.
Oh, thanks so much, Suzanne.
A question I have, in your teaching and learning goal, you mentioned student agency. Could you expand on what was meant by that and maybe provide some examples?
Sure. So, really thinking about, when we're designing lessons and thinking of different ways to present material to students, making sure that we're giving a lot of choice. And we've seen this a lot. I see it a lot across all of the different visits that I have in different classrooms and things like that, is constantly like opportunities for students to have choice. I was just talking to middle school ELA teacher the other day in 6th grade, who was talking about a student who was actually kind of struggling a little bit, but she was able to figure out, he was really, really great on the computer and has like a ton of tech skills. So was able to give him some choices around how he showed his learning. And that's really what we're looking at for when we're talking about student agency. And then I think you got a chance to see a little bit of some of the work that we're doing when Niam came to talk a little bit about the design for change work. So really thinking about what are some of the authentic problems and things that are facing our community, and then how do we put those together with some of the skills that we're trying to teach kids so that they can actually be working on things that are relevant to their lives and their community. So I think that's what we're talking about when we're talking about student agency. But it's spanning. I mean, it goes. I know. Sometimes people think that it is our older kids who really are able to have all of that student, like who are capable of that student agency, but I see some of like the greatest amount, like Liam was a great example of a second grader who was really able to have some agency and over his own learning and what was happening. So does that help answer that question?
It is, yes. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Well, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Actually, Andy asked the question that I was originally going to ask, but just in listening to some of the other comments, my question was about the paraprofessional schedules and efficiencies. And so listening to Suzanne's comment about kind of being interested in the notes as you go, I'm really interested in where you might go with sort of utilizing paraprofessionals with more professional development and then utilizing them to collaborate across grade levels to pull student groups. And so I'd just like to get an update at some point about how that body of work is going and what your ideas are around that. So that was interesting.
Yeah, happy to
All right.
share.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that brings us now to Runkle.
Hi, everybody. Let me just, I will share my screen as well. So I want to start by saying I love my school site council. It's a big school site council and we meet in person. We meet almost every month. We've just taken the last month off, but we've had great membership, great participation. We've had parents who have moved to different countries and asked to still attend via Zoom, which has been pretty amazing. So I'm very excited about that. Runkle's school improvement plan was developed in 2020. So we're at the end of this year. At the end of this year will be the end of the school improvement plan. So I too have goals that center around some of the pandemic work that we had to do. And I feel like that's not worth spending a lot of time on, and we only have 3 goals. So I will be even more brief than my wonderful colleagues. In terms of budgetary impact, I don't really have any budgetary impact on this school improvement plan. The district has provided professional development in all of the new curriculum that's been put forth last year and this year. So we were not impacted by that. Runkle's seed cohort, that we had a seed class last year that was just Runkle staff. We have 2 Runkle staff members who are trained in seed, are trained instructors, and they are doing another class this year as well. So that's already in the budget. And again, we've received incredible support from Matt Dubois and some of the work that he's been doing. So in terms of the budget, I think I'm okay. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So our first goal too is around academic. I can't see the goal on the front because my screen is a mess, but is around teaching and learning. And I just wanted to give updates in terms of the 3 goals that I have, and I was planning on focusing on the positive. The new programs that the district has put forth, the M-Class program, and the trainings on that, the Haggerty, the phonemic awareness programs that they put forth have been amazing. And the data that we've been able to collect from M-Class has been really important. I feel like just the information that they gleaned from the first trimester of the first beginning fall information showed that like our second graders, almost 80% of our second graders were at or above grade level in the beginning of the year for their phonemic awareness skills and literacy. That means a lot. It means that I think the fact that we had those kindergartners in person in Brookline in 2020 in September did have an impact because they're doing really well. And the students that are being identified in this new programming as needing support are not surprises. They're students that we've already identified and are doing work with. And I also want to give a shout out to my literacy team, the coaches and the literacy specialists. From the beginning of this year in September, we started PD with our staff. They were able to, before school started, do a presentation for teachers so they could talk about the science of reading, which I know is very controversial right now. But our literacy team did a piece of work during the first 2 days before the students came back that gave teachers language that they could use to talk to parents, that they could acknowledge what they were doing well already and show parents and speak to them about the new work that's coming forward. And also I think to hopefully put parents' minds at ease and staff's minds at ease that they are doing well and that we are meeting the needs of students. The next goal was around equity at Runkle, and this goal, like I said, this is we're at the end of this term. 2023 is when the school improvement ends. We too are working with Janae. We too are working with Hang Young. Again, our seed program has been very successful at Runkle. We're hosting our second full class of just Runkle people, which is wonderful to do it within your building. And the teachers' feedback around seed has been very positive. Just the fact that they're meeting with other staff members who they never see. So kindergarten teachers talking to 8th grade teachers, talking to specialists has been wonderful. And then this year we have a new group. They call themselves Sprout because they're an outreach of seed. The seed class from last year is meeting this year and having it once a month, and they're doing book groups and have continued because that was such a tight knit group that they're continuing to do that work. So that feels great because the work didn't stop. It's moving forward. We also have a parent organization at Runkle that started this year called ROAR. That stands for Runkle Organization Against Racism. It's a parent group that got together just at the end of last year, and they want to work with our PTO and with our teachers to work together to do some anti-racist work here at Runkle. And then our third goal, similar to other schools, is around the social emotional learning. And in terms of, we too have received positive impact based on the panorama surveys. And I do think that students are connecting with teachers and building relationships. I do feel after listening to some of the feedback from the middle school study that we just had done, that the engagement piece with students is problematic. And I think that we need to think more about that for our next school improvement plan. But I meet with my clinical team on Friday mornings, and we are doing really good work with that, with our new social worker has made a huge impact. And then the information that Matt provides for our team around in the connections that he's made with outside agencies, Brookline, not just Brookline Mental Health, the Brighton Alston program. And then there's Cartwheels is another program that's actually providing services for students outside of school who we might not be able to get services for social, emotional, mental health. And that feels really good to have something other than the Brookline Center to call on and get support for students. I think that's it for me.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Any questions, Nancy?
No, I'm gone for 6 months, and all of this stuff, this new stuff is terrific. I mean, it's great. Tell me more about Roar. And is this like across? Is it just a Runkle thing? And
it is just a Runkle thing, and it literally just started last spring. So it was started by some METCO parents, but they were included. They're now including any parents who feel like they are parents of color, students of color, and they just came and presented to the PTO. So we're really trying to connect it to the work that's already being done here. But it's brand new. They've only had a couple of meetings, Nancy.
I'm going to call you
Okay.
probably tomorrow and get some more information because this is terrific. So thank you. Thank you for your presentation. That was terrific.
Anyone else? Jennifer?
I just thought it was really interesting. Thank you so much for this. That as the school improvement plans are individual to schools, but I noticed trends across all three, focusing on like core areas of like SEL and teaching and learning and equity. So it's just really interesting. Even though the specifics at each school are a little bit different, there are some common threads, and it's nice to see that the plans supporting the work or working in concert with district goals. I just thought that was really neat observation. Sorry, you're the last of the three to go, Ms. Finnegan. So it's sort of a general comment about all three of our presentations. But it just sounds like really exciting work. And it was so nice to have you presenting the SIP in conjunction with our Spotlight on Excellence this evening as well.
Thank you. And I also think that it speaks to, I do feel like principals need to do more sharing, and I'm happy that we have that time now built into our meetings. But honestly, like I sit here and I learn so much about what other schools are doing, and it shouldn't be that we have to come to a school committee meeting to know what other what our colleagues are doing in Brookline. If they're doing really great things, we should all be hearing about them all, on a monthly basis.
That's great. I'm glad you have that time.
Mariah?
I just want to follow on that, Donna, and say, and that ties into what I was saying to Jen earlier about asking how they get shared. It's really nice to hear from the principals in this venue too, and I would love to, when you all are sharing best practices, how we get the chance to hear about them too, and how they get elevated to the community in general. I think it's nice to have the opportunity to hear even more about those than we do. I feel like we don't get a chance enough to hear about some of that. So I'd be happy to have visits from principals too, to hear more things. It's lovely to hear spotlights on excellence, but those tend to be more student focused and not necessarily systems based, I guess, is the way I describe it. So thanks.
Anyone else? All right, well, thank you very much for joining us, Ms. Finnegan, and thank you to all three of the principals who joined us this evening to present the school improvement plans. All right, so we will now move on to
David, I might just say thank you to all three, and congratulations, Dr. Guillory, for getting them in time, in a timely manner. I never thought we'd get through three in such a fast time.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
We did move at a very good pace today.
We did.
All right, so our next agenda item is a report on Pierce relocation options, survey results, discussion, and possible vote. Principal Yadoff, you're up.
Hi, everybody. It's great to see you all. Can you hear me? Yeah, perfect. And I think Janae, you're gonna share the screen. Is that right?
Yes, I'm trying. Give me 1 second to.
No worries.
I do have that privilege, right? Give me 1 second, everybody. I feel like my Zoom is doing something new tonight. Hold on.
It just updated this morning, right as I was getting onto a new Zoom.
Yeah, that's why I'm having trouble. I'm sorry, everybody. Is it working? Oh gosh. Okay, sorry, here we go.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. Now I have to get out of here so I can see my notes. All right. So we're going to talk tonight through where we are right now and thinking about relocation planning, and with an emphasis on what our community forums have reflected most recently. Next slide. Perfect. So we hosted a community forum back on the 7th of December. That was the most recent community forum. The goal was to solicit feedback about the updated relocation proposal, which included a combination of Newbury and Old Lincoln School. We also sent a follow-up survey the following day. And then I've also listed just the most recent prior community forums as it relates to the project. We've obviously had a lot of family engagement here. Next slide. Actually, go ahead, go 2 slides here, thanks. So the current thinking right now is that OLS will house grades K to 5, and that has several advantages. First, it preserves the existing PSED programming. So PSED hasn't functioned at the middle school level ever. Prior to the pandemic, we did offer enrichment for our older middle school students, but we haven't had the staffing to do that through our extended day since COVID. So this would allow us to continue to run the sort of full gamut of programming, because we'd be able to keep those grade bands that have extended day options together. It also provides the shortest travel distance for our youngest students. We know this building works K to 8 because it has in the past. And the building also has a small library, a small gymnasium, a cafeteria, and auditorium space. We anticipate having to continue thinking about some things. One is that we know that the Boylston Street playground is on the docket for potential renovation that will overlap with our time at OLS. And so we'll need to think about how or when that would happen. We obviously need to think about safe crossing to and from the school. So when that was the original Lincoln School, many members of that school community were on that side of the street as walkers, and now almost all of our community will be on the other side of the street. So we'll need to think about that safe crossing both to and from school. Fortunately, the high school has given us a path to that. They did an amazing job paving the way there, and they've got lots of feedback about what works and what doesn't work in terms of making sure that that intersection can be safely managed. We'll also need to think about it in terms of recess at the playground. However, the high school also has guidance for us there because they did that midday transition as students moved back and forth between the two campuses. So we're grateful for that model. And we'll need to think about preparation and delivery of lunches because there is not a full-size kitchen there that would allow for the preparation of the food to happen. Again, all the other schools who've used this as swing space have paved that path for us. So while we anticipate having to problem solve it, we also know that there's a path forward. Next slide. In thinking about Newbury for grades 6 through 8, we know that advantage-wise, older students are going to be much better able to handle either busing or a longer walk. That building, for those of you who have not been in it, has wide hallways, pre-installed lockers, and appropriately sized bathrooms for our older students. There's a nice cozy space that would work really well for a middle school library. And there are some real opportunities to build a middle school centric schedule. That's not something you can ever do in a K-8 school where the entire building schedule is necessarily intertwined. So if we're going to pull 3 grades out, 6 to 8 does make a lot of sense because it would allow us to build that middle school centric schedule. We would need to do some more thinking about supporting teachers who will be on a cart. Right now, because we're looking at sharing that space with other town purposes, we would be confined to those top 2 floors, which does mean that anybody who was not essentially a homeroom teacher in 6 through 8 would be on a cart and would be sharing space. So we'll need to plan for supporting teachers there. We'll also need to plan for lunches in classrooms unless we can get access to some additional space in the building on level 1. We can also leverage the amazing outdoor space there in the nice weather. So we do anticipate that regardless of what additional space we may or may not get, we will make excellent use of outdoor space. And COVID has taught us how to do that well. So I'm confident we can overcome those challenges. Navigating PE with no gymnasium space is definitely something I've already started thinking about. We do have health 2 times a week and PE 2 times a week in 7th and 8th grade, which does give us an opportunity to build a very creative schedule where we have the same teacher teaching health and PE, and they can leverage the weather and make decisions about, okay, these 2 days this week look like those are going to be the worst days. So we're going to use those as wellness inside in the form of the health curriculum. And then these other 2 days look like they're going to be the best for outdoors. And so we'll leverage those for our PE lessons. And obviously transportation for students, which we'll talk more about on the next slide. So several themes definitely emerged pretty quickly from the December survey. Many of those overlap with our prior community surveys. One common theme was we really liked Clark Road. And the reason people really like that is because it really keeps their children in very close proximity to one another. And sorry, my cat is like relentlessly trying to get into this room. So I'm just going to concede defeat and allow her in. Going to go back to the beginning there. So Clark Road, and there she is. Clark Road allows the proximity of students. So one of the things that's really true about Pierce and maybe less so at some of the other schools is an enormous percentage of our student body walk. A lot of our families don't have cars. They live in places that don't have parking, or they're here for a short period of time and don't have a car, or they've just simply made the choice to live a car-free life. And that's part of why they live in Brookline. And so a lot of our older students do walk our younger students. And so with K2 and 3-8 being on the same street, even if they were a little bit apart, that was still pretty feasible. But once we split kids up, that was a concern. If 3 to 8 are together, that leaves K to 2 sort of all alone. And so that's part of why we went with K to 5, because our 4th and 5th graders could walk younger siblings. Despite all of that, the real obstacle with Newbury is going to be transportation. We heard that loud and clear. A very common theme is if you can figure out transportation, we can make this space work. One of the things we've been talking a lot about in an effort to save funding is to have a centralized bus pickup We're grateful that we have the library circle right adjacent to our campus, and that should be outside the construction zone. There's also Emerson Park right across the street. Both of those could provide good opportunities for bus pickup so that any student who wanted it could potentially jump on the bus there, get a ride to school, and then at the end of the day could get dropped off there. That also addresses some of the concerns that families had about students losing access to the teen center if they were all the way over there at Newbury. We also have been asked to explore the possibility of having one of the buses that leaves Newbury drop off at OLS instead of dropping off right in the heart of the village. So those older students could potentially pick up younger siblings. So we can think about whether there's enough interest or need for that as well. One of the other pieces of feedback, and this was true about the OLS part of the plan, is that the Davis footbridge remains closed. And that's a real shortcut for a lot of families. I know that was an issue during the high school renovation, and it's definitely something that's on the minds of some people. In all of these cases, families expressed significant concern about splitting the community. That's going to be a reality, regardless of which space we choose. We just don't have a building big enough in Brookline. And so the key is, can we do this in a way that allows that Pierce community to remain a community despite the split? And that's where a lot of the objection to the Driscoll proposal came up. I do want to sort of reiterate some of the concerns that were expressed about that plan, just to bring people back to that. So for those who don't remember that when we were last talking about Driscoll, Dave Euclid and I spoke about the importance of that not being 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, because it creates a really problematic schedule in a whole host of ways that for feasibility's sake, it would really need to be K-2. There were definitely ways we talked about it being feasible with K-2, but the impacts were quite serious. So the one impact would be on BEEP. There's only 9 available classrooms at Driscoll, assuming current enrollment doesn't increase. That number of available classrooms will decrease as more students return to Driscoll. So we would need to take those 3 BEEP classrooms for our kindergarten, early childhood classrooms, and we obviously don't feel good about poaching BEEP space. There are significant concerns about outdoor space access for at least the first year. Driscoll's going to have even less outdoor space next year than they have this year. And so the thought of a significant increase in their student body sharing what will be an even smaller space is obviously very concerning for Dave. There were concerns expressed by both Driscoll and Pierce parents about having less access to extended day, given increased numbers of students in one building with demand for that, and also about the potential loss of extended day for grades 3 to 5. So if we had Driscoll extended day there, our extended day program potentially wouldn't have the staff they need to staff 3 to 5 extended day over at OLS. And so that was a significant concern for a lot of our 3 to 5 families who rely on that extended day option. There are concerns that rebounding Driscoll enrollment, which is obviously unpredictable, but we do anticipate at least some of that, could quickly lead to overcrowding in K-2. There were community concerns among the Pierce community about their kids in K-2 sort of feeling like they were Driscoll kids and then having to make that transition to be Pierce kids in grade 3, especially if there were intermingling of the kiddos at Driscoll. A lot of the concerns were around that separation that we talked about, that K-2 students going in one direction and 3-8 students going in another direction really leaves parents with K-2 students very few options for transportation, because a 2nd grade sibling can't independently walk a kindergarten sibling. You really would need an older child for that. And then Driscoll community members in the summer expressed some pretty significant concerns about the impact of this kind of crowding on their school culture as they're trying to come back together as a new community and establish themselves. So those were all of the things that came through in various forms, both in this survey and in the prior survey as well. Can we go to next steps? Perfect. So once the final decision is made, and I'm hoping that that will be very soon, we have a lot of work to do. So we have a set of instructional steps and some non-instructional steps as well. So instructionally, one of the most challenging steps is going to be building a schedule for next school year that can peel apart in the middle of the year. And the reason it needs to do that is because we're looking at a February vacation move. And what we don't want to do is to have to build a second schedule and ask everybody to start in a new space midway through the year with a brand new schedule. So what that's going to require is taking the grade bands that are going to be separated and building the schedules separately that can overlap while we're together and then peel apart in a way that doesn't have staff making crazy transitions back and forth between two buildings. So that there's a lot of implications for that, especially as it relates to our specialists, and that's going to be a bear of a schedule. So that's a piece of why I'm hoping we can get to that decision quickly, because this is going to be a project. We'll also need to go back and visit all of the spaces again, and probably again and again after that, to determine which classrooms will be best suited located in which room on each campus. We'll need to collaborate with curriculum coordinators to discuss any programmatic impacts of relocation. That's going to be specifically true in PE, potentially in science, music, and art. And then we'll need to review staffing assignments to minimize travel time between locations. That's going to allow us to preserve instructional minutes. We do have a lot of staff that work across multiple grades that will be split if they remain in those grades. So we have to have those conversations. And then in terms of non-instructional, we'll have to assign non-instructional spaces. So that's all of the people who need offices. That's the workspaces where teachers get their work done, a break space for staff. All of that stuff will need to be assigned. We'll need to prepare materials and systems for packing, labeling, and moving. Again, we have the experience of many who've done this before us, including some that have done mid-year moves. So we're going to leverage all of that existing information. We'll need a plan for collaboratively packing and unpacking and the time that that's going to take during the school year. We'll need to work with all of the stakeholders to establish transportation plans and systems, and also work with all the stakeholders to plan for meal services at both locations. So as you can see, there's an awful lot of work to be done once we do know those locations. And realistically, none of this work can be done until those locations have been finalized. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions? All right. Sorry. Go ahead, Stephen.
Hi, thank you for that presentation. Was this topic discussed at the last school committee meeting that I was not at?
I wasn't at it either.
Okay, then when you reference the ruling out of Driscoll at a previous conversation, what are you referring
Oh,
to?
so way back last summer, we had conversations about potentially using Driscoll for 6-8. And we had decided during those conversations between Driscoll and me and Dr. Guillory and other stakeholders that 6-8 schedule wasn't feasible, and had swung to exploring it in terms of K2. And that's the point at which last summer we had a community forum that included both Driscoll and Pierce families, and then solicited community feedback. And we got a pretty overwhelming no thank you from that.
Okay, so a few questions for you. Thank you again for this. This was really helpful for me. One, do you have the data from the surveys?
Yes, so the most recent survey data was shared with you all before December break. And I somewhere I have the summer survey data. I have to dig. I don't know if I'm the owner of that data.
If it was shared with me, then I'll just have to look for it. I'm sorry for not having seen it prior to now. It was probably my own fault then. Second, I know that the school committee has talked about other schools since last summer. So it sounds like there's possibly been a disconnect between the school committee's conversation and the administration's conversation. Can you review again the reasons that you've been ruling out Driscoll specifically and other schools more generally, starting with the number of classrooms? Can you just give us that granular level detail? What did you mean by 9 classrooms being available and having to poach from BEEP?
Sure. So right now, if nothing changes with the Driscoll enrollment, the building will be unenrolled, will have enrollment lower than its capacity at the equivalent of 9 classrooms. So that essentially means we could move 9 sections of peer students, theoretically. If children were widgets, we could move 9 sections of widgets into Driscoll and not interrupt Driscoll. Problem is, in order for us to fit at OLS, we actually need to move 12 sections of widgets. And so the place that we get those other 3 classrooms is BEEP, because kindergarten students need the same kind of space early childhood, bathroom inside, yada, 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 that BEEP classrooms have. And there aren't enough kindergarten appropriate classrooms at Driscoll to meet the needs of both the Driscoll kindergartners and the Pierce kindergartners without going in and taking those 3 BEEP
So
classrooms.
if you didn't put from BEEP, how many available classrooms would there be?
9.
Which would only accommodate how many sections?
It would accommodate 2.25 sections.
Which is not helpful at all.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll stop there.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mariah?
Thank you, Jamie, for the presentation and the recap. And I just want to reiterate something, or maybe sort of reiterate a little bit of what Stephen's talking about is right now on the table, there is essentially the option that you presented is the only option actively in front of us because of what you talked through about Driscoll, because the project budget was approved without any lease funds, whether it's for the Clark Road facility or for whatever other things. I've heard community mention of the of interest in, oh, what about the St. Mary's building? But again, we don't have lease money for that, even if that building were available to us, et cetera. So this is, just to be clear, as I understand it, and I'm hoping we can get confirmation, this is the option on the table that is available to us in terms of fitting within both Pierce's programmatic and community needs, as well as project budget. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. I will also add, Matt and I did go look at that St. Mary's space. Not gonna lie, I was pretty psyched when I heard there might be a school right in our backyard. But that building has essentially been converted to all offices. There are 3 classrooms remaining in that building. After our walkthrough, I felt pretty confident. You'd essentially need to tear down every wall interior and then rebuild in order to recreate. I walked through with the lens of like, okay, if we take these adjacent walls down, can we create something that looks like a classroom? They did a marvelous job creating office space and uncreating classroom spaces. There's no easy solution to renovating that space. So even if we did have the lease money, I anticipate it would be a fairly sizable investment capital wise to turn it all back into classrooms.
Now, I understand we have another slideshow coming up with Matt Gillis, who's going to go into some of those questions in more detail. So why don't we, so thank you very much for this, Principal Yadoff. Oh, go ahead, Stephen.
Before we get there, can you say one more time, Principal Yadoff, why Driscoll doesn't work for grades 6 through 8?
Yeah, so essentially we'd be creating a supersized middle school. We'd be creating a 6-section, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade middle school cohort, which has never been done in Brookline and which programmatically we're not built for.
I'm sorry, as a supersized middle school.
Supersized middle school. So we would
What do you
have,
mean?
that means that at each grade level, we would have roughly 150 kids.
So some kind of crazy science experiment is what we.
Some kind of crazy science experiment. Yep, that's correct. And like, if you think about our middle school conservatory model, so that's all 6th, 7th, and 8th graders have music at the same time. So we would need to find a space in this building that was not built for this to have all of those children have music at the same time. We would need to find a cafeteria space big enough to have all of those children have lunch at the same times, because the way middle school schedules have to work together in order for teachers to teach across grades, their lunches have to overlap or be simultaneous, depending on how you piece it all together. And then there's also no outdoor space. So I don't know if any of you've ever been in a middle school after 3 days of no outdoor recess, but it actually starts to get kind of unsafe. Like, kids need to move. That's not a judgment, that's a fact. They're biologically, they have a need to move. And so we need to be able to get kids outside. So if you're taking that many middle schoolers and you're putting them inside together in this quirky little experiment, and then saying, oh, by the way, you can't get outside and run around, it's really just not appropriate for children.
Okay, so it's technically possible, but it's probably crazy because it's putting something that we've never had before in a building, which is an enormous middle school. We would be creating an insanely complex scheduling challenge. We'd be doing it where there's a real lack of outdoor space. And
I don't know that the schedule could be built. It might be buildable, but we wouldn't know until we sat down to do it.
and then that's all putting aside the school culture issues.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to understand that. Thanks again.
All right, so why don't we move now to Matt Gillis for some further slides and information.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to share my screen. All right. This may look a little bit familiar from an earlier Pierce relocation. I've got a handful of slides here. First one is just a reminder of the budget. It's 1.54 million, dropped in 4 buckets. We did
Matt,
do our.
can you turn it into presentation mode? Because the slides are small, we can't see them.
Okay.
Or at least I can't.
How do I do that? I'm not familiar.
In the top right, to the right of share is a thing called slideshow.
Right of share.
Or view slideshow, apparently.
Oh, slideshow.
There you go. Thanks.
No problem.
Thank you. So much better.
All right. If I can go back if folks need me. So just quickly, there's a Pierce relocation budget that we finalized back in the summer of 2022 to get the budget within range, and it's now 1.5 million. Everything's pretty much accounted for. And we did do our due diligence to look at different places, Maimonides, 2 Clark Road, 35,000 square feet. Principal already, she told you she liked it. We get into it because it was designed as classroom, used as classrooms, still being used as classrooms, even if there's cubicles set up in some of the spaces like my office. There'd be no renovation or anything needed. We figure we could do it with 2 buses to get there based on the being 1 mile away from the Pierce school and the sort of current Pierce enrollment. Should be able to make it work. The rent is looking at that 5,332,000. Comes from looking at 4 years of the last year of the lease that we're currently in, where we had a 1-year extension price. We never settled on a lease price with Maimonides. The price just seemed to get too high. So even if they were to go with the last known price, it would bring us out to about $43 a square foot. Looked at Newbury, 150 Fisher Ave, using the top 2 floors. The principal.
Excuse me, Matt.
Yes.
Go back to that first one and just make sure you point out what the projected or the anticipated total site cost for the 4 years would be.
Oh, total site cost for the 4 years would be $6,047,000. Again, our budget was 1.5 for that. I hear the chuckles in the background. You guys aren't muted. Newbury, 150 Fisher Ave, using the top 2 floors, leaving the bottom floor and the sub-basement for the town of Brookline. Principal could support this endeavor. Thankfully, it's Pierce, and they're being accustomed to open floor design and using some open floor spaces that were in the library there as classroom spaces. So 2 classrooms would be in sort of one big open space. And they also have some existing classrooms, had some offices. No major renovations or repairs needed. The busing cost, we would have to add some flooring, some electrical, and some data to the spaces. A lot of it, I guess, got ripped out. We're estimating that at about $100,000 plus anything that the building department would say would be required. So it could be a little bit higher than that. That'd be $815,000 that is in our budget range, and about $14.36 a square foot. Looking at
Just before we go on for a moment, Andy has a question regarding bus transportation.
Yeah,
Sure.
thanks, Matt. Just the busing estimate for Newbury is the same as for Maimonides. I think that you said that was 2 buses. Is that realistic? Because certainly from the survey results, it seemed like we would probably need to run more for this to be viable for most Pierce families.
It is the most efficient way we could do it. So when we buy a bus per our contract with the large school bus vendor, we get it for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. So we could have 2 buses and run 2 trips. So we'd run a shuttle bus from Pierce. So folks would walk to Pierce and then get on the bus and be shuttled over to 150 Fisher Ave. We'd have sort of assignments, whether that be 7:25, 7:30, and then say 7:40, 7:45 to get everybody there before 8 o'clock. That's the most efficient way we could do it. Because if it was
I'm asking about the number of buses that are needed.
two buses, but they'd make 2 trips apiece.
Why only 2 though? Like I'm
Well,
thinking that the great
because-
majority of families might actually need busing if it's going to be at Newbury. Certainly, the survey results indicated tremendous interest in busing, and we wouldn't be sticking probably to the 1.5 mile limit, right?
No, so I can show you on a slightly different slide, but basically the 2 buses would make 2 trips. So we could pay for 4 buses and have 1 trip apiece. So we could do 2 buses and have them do two shuttle runs.
So then some kids would get there and cool their heels for a good long time before the school day began.
Not too long, but it wouldn't be exactly the same time if we want to live within budget, because the cost of a bus is $357,750. So if we want to run 4 buses, it eats up our moving budget.
Okay, but we're talking about sort of a 10 minutes to shuttle back and forth. So the 2 cohorts would only be separated by that amount of time.
Correct. We haven't tested it out in the morning yet, but that would be the most efficient way to do it.
Okay.
And that would get us a little over 90, low 90% of the kids that would be eligible to take the bus, which in this case would be everybody. But some people might just choose to get there another way, because anytime we've had 100% busing anywhere I've ever been, not everybody takes the bus. It doesn't work for everybody's family and life. And it'd be the same thing for dismissal. So when school would get out, we'd have one immediate dismissal and then another one, immediately thereafter.
Okay, thank you.
Mariah?
Thanks, Matt. I just want to harp on bus transportation to Newbury. I cannot imagine a world in which it takes 10 minutes to get from Pierce to Newbury at 7:30 in the morning. I just don't think that's realistic. And not to mention back again fighting or going along with the inbound traffic.
Back again, we're expecting to take a little bit longer.
Yeah. So thinking that you're going to have one going at 7:25 and one going at 7:40, that same bus back to send kids again at 7:45, I just can't imagine. So I'm not sure that this plan is going to work to actually get kids to school on time. But my second question is, rather than, and I don't know if this is possible, and I meant to ask you before this public meeting, so I apologize for asking you this in public meeting.
That's okay, fire away.
And the answer is totally fine if you're like, I don't know or no. Is it possible if more affordable to, given the volume of buses we might need for this, to buy them and hire someone and then like sell them back at the end of the project period, or resell them at the end of the project period, rather than doing the bus contract with the external, with whoever you go with?
Interesting question. So off the top of my head, we would be paying, to buy a bus per diem at $500 a day, 180 days is $90,000. And we'll be paying between $525 and $600 a day over the course of the contract because they span different fiscal years. So let's call it at least $100,000 a bus. So even if we bought the buses at $400,000 to $500,000, we would still need to hire the drivers, probably pay them insurance and other benefits, find a place to park the buses and maintain them. And those are all obstacles that we've looked at when we considered, whether or not to do electric buses. And electric buses are, last checked pre-pandemic, 4 times the cost of a diesel or gas fueled school
Well,
bus.
but wouldn't the buses have resale value at the end? So a lot of that upfront purchase price would then be recouped, thus
The-
making it cheaper?
They would, they certainly do have resale value. But it's kind of tough to gauge that market because when we're not in it that often, and the players that are usually in it are actually the people that sell new buses. They also sell used buses. So what most people do because of the bid laws in Massachusetts is they get a trade in for their old bus when they buy a new one, right? And then they take that used bus, because I had experience with this in another system. They take that used bus and they would often drive it down the street. It wouldn't even go to their yard, and already have it sold to somebody else because of the time it takes to go through bids, and the number of private entities and a few public that are looking to buy good used vehicles. So yeah, 4 years old buses from us, they would have a decent resale value. But then does the money go back to the project? Well, under the revenue laws, I believe that if it's not specified in like a revolving fund, then that money goes into the town's general fund, which is why most people do it as a trade-in credit in their bids, so they can get a lower price on their new vehicle. I hope that answered the
It
mechanics of the
does.
question.
I would guess I would still hope that we could at least, no pun intended, kick the tires on what this might look like for in the current market. And if there's an opportunity to think about how it might allow us to have fewer trips per direction in the morning or in the afternoon, and also achieve budget goals if possible.
Yeah, I mean, I've costed this out several times over the years, so I have a format. I can dust it off and try and track down sort of the new prices of things, and then come up with an estimate for it. But we still are working with 1.5 million. Should the project pass to make it work, and the only way that goes up is if we take it from somewhere else in the project, which, with the project being, I'll call it 25% designed, we're not ready to take anything from the quality or the program of the project.
Well, the other thing I would say, sorry to just harp on this a little more, is just if there's a way, and I don't know if the bus companies allow this kind of thing, to do 4 trips in the morning and or have four buses in the morning and 2 in the afternoon doing 2 loops. I just think that the way the morning goes, it's so much critical. It's really critical to be at school and have everyone get there at that right time. And if we had to do 2 trips back in the afternoon, that would be much easier for people to deal with than the morning rush. So just something else, if that's possible to think about.
It is. Getting everybody to school in the morning is always the crunch. Having people leave, not everybody's in the same rush to be somewhere at the exact same time. Leaving school is always slightly more casual as you got after school programs and other things going on.
So a related question I have, is there any consideration into having a staggered start time to the school day, especially given that this is middle school? Is that a possibility to go with 2 buses, but have the day start maybe an hour apart or whatever the right time interval might be?
That is a possibility that I would need to review both with the principal and the superintendent, teachers' collective bargaining agreement for, the terms and conditions of when the workday is probably specified in there.
Yeah, it would definitely be a pretty significant obstacle with the collective bargaining agreement. And in addition to that, a lot of our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade staff are shared. And so in order to ensure that all students had equitable access to all of the programming, it would essentially require some teachers to work a longer day, which has some significant implications, both in terms of collective bargaining and money.
All right, anyone else? Right. Okay, go ahead, continue.
So St. Mary's did 2 estimates. 18 Herd Road, it's about 18,000 square feet per what we were given from Collier's. If that name rings a bell, that was the same real estate development firm that the town bought the Newberry property from at 150 Fisher You know, the first estimated rent and major repairs, as Jamie laid out for you, there were about 3 classrooms and mostly offices at about $200 a square foot to renovate the inside of the building. It cost us about $6 million, and that is with a rental price of about $30 a square foot, which was quoted to us by the realtor as we were walking through. The low price, it takes about $25 a square foot for the rental price, and what did we use there? About $85 a square foot if we did it on the ultra cheap, assuming we could get price work done that way. I'm not really optimistic about that. Just looking at our recent Summer Slammer project at Brookline High, where we were renovating some classrooms and finishing up some other work around the rest of the project. And you know, the contractor still is not 100% complete due to labor and some materials, and they don't think they'll be done until February. So we can't expect to get it done on the cheap here. But if people wanted to know what the price would be because of the schedule for when we have to move out to start demolition, we have to move out and we have to move into a place that's ready for us. So aside from the fact that the layout didn't fit very well with the 6,000 square feet and the egresses and things, we didn't think this was a good match. But you know, when we got word that this was a possibility for us, we went to take a look at it. Again, so between the spaces at Mamo, 35,000 square feet, a gym, yes, a kitchen, no. So lunch would be delivered, a cafeteria, yes. Lunch delivery, there's no cost delivery to any of the schools. We do that now. We have the capacity to do a couple hundred more lunches. It's adjusting the day and a little bit of time when the driver picks up and drops off. So again, Newberry, no gym, no kitchen, no caf. So they'd be in the classrooms. St. Mary's, no gym, no kitchen, no caf. And then the other schools, you know, yes, those things work. Lunch delivery would not be needed, but you heard about all the other issues with trying to fit in. You know, Driscoll looks like an easy match, but it's a piece of the puzzle, and then we have sort of fragmented pieces. So the bus contract was, and that pricing is built off of the per diem prices and the number of days. Current construction schedule is to move out of 2024 and move in August of 2027. Newberry reflects 2 shuttle buses making 2 trips from School Street to Fisher Ave. That's how we got the price. And it's two, you know, it'd be one way, not a bunch of stops, one stop, 2 miles from Old Pierce to Newberry. 2 trips we believe is feasible in the morning. We have 4 buses now that hit anywhere from 2 to 3 schools apiece in the morning, except for one Heath bus that just does all Heath, and the high school buses, which just deliver to the high school. So, and there's the notes, other notes about St. Mary's that just doesn't really work. Us sharing space with the town, again, we would be on the top floors, and the building department wants the use of the ground floor and the sub basement for their staff and shops. That was all of it.
All right, thank you very much for that. Any questions? Any further comments? All right.
Appreciate the support.
Thank you. Okay, so discussion. What do people think about this proposal?
What are you asking of us tonight, David?
Well, if we have a general consensus by a vote that we should recommend to the select board that we utilize the Newberry space for grades 6 through 8, I would like for us to take that vote tonight so that we can then formally make the request to the select board. The select board actually has that expectation that we would be voting on this proposal, then having it go before them for their approval. My sense is that they've been very willing to hear us. They've invited Dr. Guillory and I twice already to speak on this, and they're really waiting for our cue. Mariah?
I'm really excited about the opportunity that Newbury provides I think Matt's presentation was really helpful in reviewing all the different components, as well as yours, Jamie. And I think that it was really helpful too to see the price per square foot in comparison and see how really there's quite a bit being done. I think that they're making the best of a very complicated situation. It's a good choice overall. I do want us to, as both Jamie and Matt talked about, and we talked about extensively, to continue to think about what the transportation would look like. I'm hopeful that there's opportunity. One note that I would just make is the difference in square footage of the current Newbury proposal for just 2 floors is pretty reduced compared to the other ones. And I would love to, when the school committee makes its request to the select board, ask if we can ask for 3 of the floors instead of 2 of the floors to what I presume would bring that closer up to like 21,000 square feet, and would do some of the things that Jamie referred to in terms of being able to access space for, remind me, Jamie, cafeteria and gym. Yeah, okay, that's what
Cafeteria, gym, art.
which I think will make it really that much more functional of a space for students. So I'm hoping that our request would include 3 floors and not just the 2 floors that have been proposed. But overall, I'm really excited about the opportunities. I'm not a Pierce parent anymore. I've just had my 8th grader graduate, but as a very recent Pierce middle school parent, I think it's a really exciting opportunity, and I would have been happy to be a Pierce middle school parent going through that, knowing it's not, nothing is ideal, but it really offers some really great opportunities. And so I hope that the school committee will support it, and specifically with that larger number of floors request to the select board. Thanks.
Nancy?
I didn't realize that there were more floors available.
I don't know that.
Are there, Matt? How many floors are there?
There's 3 floors and what we'll call a sub-basement that I think has, off the top of my head, 3 classrooms in it.
Is there a reason why we can't? I mean, again, I'm sorry if I'm Johnny completely. No,
We're-
I'm saying. if
Well,
we're
it's
gonna
it's a sharing with the town. We're trying to strike a peaceful accord.
Oh, I
So
see.
part of the issue is the buildings department is already using those lower 2 floors.
Oh, I see.
To some degree. They've expressed some willingness to further share, but in an effort to avoid stepping on proverbial toes a little too much, we've been a little more conservative so far in terms of the space that we've looked at. But asking for 3 floors and explaining
Yeah.
how important it would be for purposes of having some cafeteria space and some more opportunities and flexibility around PE,
Yeah.
that's certainly something we can make.
Yeah, then definitely.
Would someone be able to describe that extra floor, how it's currently laid out, and how difficult it would be to turn it into a cafeteria and gym?
Yeah,
What's
so
there right now?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that. So the most important thing to know is that there's a significantly large space that they're using right now as a shop. And I think it's really the only shop space that that particular department is able to access right now. And one of the things we immediately thought about when we walked through was, is there a way for us to do all of the things and not touch that space? And there is. So that's on the what we call the ground level. It's somewhat separated from the other wing of the ground level, and that wing has a series of rooms. Sorry, now the cat wants to go out. I don't know what it is about cats. The other wing of the ground level has a series along one wall of classrooms, including some former science labs that are in part being used for workspace. And then there's this sort of funny side of that hallway that's an interior set of 3 adjacent classrooms. So they open to the hallway and to each other, and they have no windows. So they're not really ideal for use for classrooms because you want people to have natural light and ventilation, but they would be a really exciting opportunity for a cafe style, flexible seating, close to outdoor access for kids to have lunch. And then.
Excuse me,
Yeah,
Jamie.
yeah,
I found the floor plan if folks want me to put it up and you can talk.
sure, if that's helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, hold on one second.
You'll have to give me a minute to orient myself. Floor plans are a new skill for me. I'm getting better.
I'll help you in 1 second. So can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so there's 3 floors. This is a PDF. This is the second floor. You can see 5 classrooms. And then what was the legal reference? There was academic first floor. This is
Would you mind magnifying your screen a bit?
yeah.
Just if you would have hit that plus at the top of the center top. Thanks. That's great.
This is when you walk in off the street off of Fisher Hill Ave. This is the top floor, or second floor, what we would call the third floor. And then there's ground level floor. This is a doorway right out to the back parking lot. This part that's all whited out is being used as a shop. These were old science labs being used as a shop. These rooms are kind of being used as storage. This was part of the library that Jamie was referring to. And if we scroll down a little bit, those were the 3 rooms in the basement.
Yeah, so if you look at the rooms that I think are labeled G10 and G9, maybe,
Yep.
those rooms right there. This floor plan doesn't quite match exactly where there are walls now. This is a little on the older side. But that's actually, if I'm in the right place, that's those 3 classrooms that are adjacent to one another and are being used for storage right now. That could be a really great flexible place for kids to have lunch and socialize, and they can also zip right outside on those nicer weather days. So having access to that and potentially one of those science labs would allow us to take an art teacher off a cart, which if you're an art teacher, you'd really prefer. Now, mind you, art is only 1 time a week. And so I absolutely believe we can make it work if everybody works together and collaborates. And it's also preferable if we can have an art classroom because that allows the full range of art materials to be used as would be used in any other school in Brooklyn.
And where would the PE space be on this floor plan?
So one of the things that's tricky about this building is it has very low ceilings everywhere. And so a lot of the things that you might typically do in PE, we probably couldn't accommodate. But what we would want to do is take one of the smaller rooms, if we got access to additional spaces, and turn it into a fitness center. For those of you who are familiar with Pierce, we actually have our full-size gym, which is actually only about 2/3 of the size of what you would expect in a school of our population. But then we also have this little sunken gymnasium area that has fitness equipment. And it's a really important part of our program. We've actually built in a space to the new design for that fitness center. And so I think that would be a really exciting thing if we could find one additional classroom to leverage for a lot of PE programs, PE programming. So when students couldn't be outside, they could be inside focused on fitness. And we already own all of that equipment. So it would just be a matter of finding a room where we could relocate it to.
Any other questions?
I move the question.
I have
right,
another
so
question.
The vote.
Oh, go ahead, Stephen.
Okay, so I really would like to support this. This seems like a really excellent option. It seems like it's costed well as well. But I have a concern, which is that the last time we discussed this was October 27th, right? That's when we talked about the Pierce relocation. And we were presented a summary of where we were then, and there were 4 options presented. One of those options had an A and a B. I hear and accept what you said about Driscoll, Principal Yadoff. There was one option though, which was OLS for K through 8 and any other PSB school, or rather OLS K through 8 plus any other PSB school, which I also took to mean it could be OLS K through 5 plus any other PSB school 6 through 8. And the next steps from that meeting were that the superintendent and the town administrator would continue working together on available town facility options. So where I'm concerned and uncomfortable is I don't understand why we weren't presented with the analysis of any other options. Like, what about other schools in the district? Why were they ruled out? What other properties were considered and then ruled out? I feel like we're skipping a step, and it makes me feel like we're not doing our due diligence, and now we're being pushed into a vote because of a short timeline. So I'm concerned about how this process is unfolding.
Stephen, to start to answer that, can I mention like one of the results from the most recent survey? So, you know, the questions on the survey were like, you were supposed to check which one most applied to you. The first one was something like, I'm committed to remaining part of the Pierce community, pretty much come what may. The second option was that if space is available in some other school and subject to, you know, availability, I mean, on the understanding that no transportation would be provided, I would be interested in moving my kids to some other school. And that was selected by a little under 20% of the respondents. So that's sort of roughly the proportion of Pierce families that might consider, you know, leaving Pierce to go to some other school if space were available.
Under 20, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
under 20% or 80%?
The other 80, pretty much the other 80% like are very committed to staying at Pierce no matter what we end up doing. So about, you know, a fifth of the families would consider some other option of the kind that you're asking about. And again, that's subject to availability in the target schools and
I'm sorry,
you know,
I'm not clear on what you're saying, Andy. So if we selected another school, presumably that would be Pierce, right?
the other school, how would it be Pierce?
That's where the Pierce students would go, and that would comprise Pierce for a period.
It's the Pierce student. So I thought, Steve, you were asking, what about the option where everyone who wants to stay at Pierce goes to OLS, K through 8, and then enough people in that scenario, enough people want to leave Pierce that we can fit everybody into OLS. So what I'm saying is that about 20% of families indicated some willingness to leave Pierce for some unspecified school that might have space.
So does that mean that option 4 is not viable?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So option 4 is therefore out because not enough people will be willing to take that, would be willing to leave.
Correct. And Stephen, when we asked that same question on the survey over the summer, the percentage of families willing to consider that was even lower. And it's also important to note that Andy's right, it was almost 20%, but a lot of those families were talking about moving one child out, but not the other. So that was an interesting little detail. So people with younger kids were talking about, okay, maybe I'll transfer that younger kid and have them either start at a brand new school or go because they've only had 1 year. But my older kids, my 3rd and my 5th grader, I'm going to let them finish at Pierce.
Okay.
And so
Thank
we just didn't get enough leverage out of that number.
You fully explained why option 4 should be off the table. And was there any further consideration of any other town facilities in the time since October 27th?
We had a meeting and we brainstormed a list of, I think, every single space that could hold kids. And there just weren't any that had enough square feet that we could scooch into that would get us to that 3 grades. And so it wasn't about, we didn't like the space. It's just, there wasn't a space big enough.
So there was literally no viable spaces that were under consideration since
that we owned. That was the key, right? Because otherwise we're back in that lease game and there's no budget for lease. Correct. That the town of Brookline already owns.
Okay, thank you. You reassured my concerns. I appreciate that.
All right, I think Suzanne was moving the question, but we need a precise formulation around it.
I don't know if we have the question on the floor, but you had mentioned earlier about.
Yeah, so the way I would phrase it, what I would propose is that we ask the select board to approve the use of Newbury for swing space for grades 6 through 8, and to include, in addition to the 2 floors that have been discussed, to the greatest extent possible, space in the other 2 floors in order to accommodate lunch, physical education, and art. The reason I want to couch it a little bit to the greatest extent possible is because I don't want us to be trying to displace completely the building department, and there may be ways to share both floors. So I'd like us to really make a diligent effort to do that. So I'd stop short at saying 3 floors, but 2 floors plus to the greatest extent possible, et cetera. Okay.
I move that.
All right, is there a second? Thank you. But it could even be 4, so why stop at 3? I've just said any space that's available to the greatest extent possible. Right. Right. And in addition to those 2 floors, to the greatest extent possible, more space to accommodate lunch, physical education, and art. So what's the wording? That we recommend to the select board to approve use of Newbury for Pierce swing space grades 6 through 8 to include the 2 floors that have already been presumed to be dedicated for school use, and to the greatest extent possible, any other space on the other 2 floors in order to accommodate physical education, lunch, and art. Sure.
Okay, the 2 floors that are the minimal program acceptable space to use.
Mariah, could you turn on your mic?
No. I'm saying friendly amendment of the 2 floors that sort of provide the minimal acceptable space possible to use, and then additional space to improve or optimize the academic program.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, yes.
All right, so Suzanne, your vote?
Yes.
And Nancy seconds. And Suzanne votes yes.
Yes.
Nancy, your vote?
I vote yes.
Mariah? Andy?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes, and thanks for tolerating my questions.
Valerie?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. All right, very good. So
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Matt.
yes, thank you
Thank
very
you
much
all.
to both of you. Those presentations were extremely helpful, very informative, not only for us on school committee, but for the community at large, I expect. It was very beneficial to see all the thought and consideration that went into reaching this decision. Go ahead, Maria.
Will you or someone else be sharing the recording of tonight's discussion to the select board in advance too, so that they have it? And I don't know when is this getting taken up by them, next week? Or it's not
sure
docketed
It's not
yet?
docketed yet, to my
Okay.
knowledge, but I will certainly be reaching out to the select board to schedule something and provide this information to them.
Okay, good. Because it's just, there was so much, I thought, helpful conversation, so thanks.
And could I just ask Mariah to repeat her friendly amendment? I just want to be sure I caught the actual wording of what we're.
I'm gonna try.
Yeah.
That's what the recording's for, but it was basically 2 floors that provide the minimal acceptable, like the space for minimal acceptable program, and then additional space that would provide and that would optimize the academic experience for students.
I mean,
Because it's not about.
Want to specify art, PE, and lunch, or
It's okay with me either way, but like, I don't want what made me feel a little bit uncomfortable about the original wording was this idea that we've already talked about 2 floors. And so that's why we're asking for 2 floors, is because we've talked about 2 floors. But we've only talked about 2 floors because Jamie has scoped it down to the minimal acceptable thing that can happen. And so I just want to make it clear that the 2 floors is coming from that, and that really there's a student impact on 2 floors. It's possible, but not optimal. And we should be clear that we are always striving for optimizing student experience. And that's the difference, is they're doing minimal threshold versus optimizing. So
I agree.
Okay. Does that help, Andy?
Yes, thank you.
Nancy?
I think that in that wording, that the PE and the cafeteria and I think that is actually incredibly important right now in that wording, because it shows just how much space we do need. And if it's available on that floor, which it looks like it could be, that that would show, we don't just want more space. We need space on that floor for these things, and this space accommodates it. It kind of gives it purpose.
It does, that will certainly be mentioned.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, well, thank you again, Principal Yadoff, and for those presentations. That was very helpful. All right, so next up, we have Brookline Adult and Community Education Program Update. Sure, go ahead, Mariah.
Apologies. Is there going to be an official communication from Jamie or anybody else back to the Pierce community to let them know about tonight's vote by the school committee? Just as an interim, like at least they know that this is going on, or
I certainly think that would be a good idea to do,
or
but
in
I'll leave
your
that to.
yeah. Okay. Just somehow so it gets back to people.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, so welcome, Ms. McGlone. Go right ahead.
Good evening. Happy New Year to everybody. I'll keep my comments brief. I'm coming to you this evening with some really great news, not only for the district and our program, but also for the community at large. Brookline Adult and Community Education has been accepted as a Google partner. And what that means is we have access to different programs now that Google offers. And the one that I'm very excited to announce is with Google. That's the one that I think is going to make the biggest difference here in the community. It's happened very quickly. This is just like about 2 weeks old, so it's all new news for everybody. What Grow with Google is professional career certificates that people can take in 5 different areas. So data analytics, digital marketing, IT support, project management, and user design experience. The starting salaries for these range from $51,000 up to $92,000. So it would provide a really great boost for people once they get those certificates as they're looking to get some jobs. So Grow with Google has it's a job training solution, skilling initiative, career pathway, high-paying jobs, fast-growing fields. That I've been really impressed with what I've seen that they've done. They're using the Coursera platform. It's a virtual classroom, and it's been developed by Google employees and experts. So it's very current in what they're teaching. The nice thing about the program is they emphasize that you do not need a college degree or relevant prior experience to be able to participate in this. So it really takes away a lot of barriers for people. And we have been working very closely to try to roll this program out for these different certificates with the Housing Authority, the Black and Brown Club, METCO, Steps to Success. And everybody seems really excited about this. It is going to happen fairly quickly. We did put it in our winter catalog. We already have 76 people enrolled in different programs. Our catalog's only been out a week. So I'm on Monday, I'm going to be meeting with these different groups, and we'll find out how many people from their respective communities might be interested. So what Google did was, when I applied to become a Google partner and then mentioned specifically the Grow with Google program, they, I didn't think we were going to get 500 scholarships. I thought they were going to give us, a couple of slots here and there for a few of those certifications. They gave us 500. It's completely free for those partner organizations that I just mentioned, the Housing Authority, Steps to Success, METCO, all of those folks. And we did offer access to anybody in the general public with a $10 registration fee, just to help recoup some of the overhead costs in offering this program. It takes about 3 to 6 months for people if they give it a 10-hour per week commitment, and the scholarships run out in 12 months. Once everything is complete, the people are ready for a job. And another bonus to this program is they're offering career resources, so coaching, interviews, resume building. And then I think the most appealing thing is that Google has already connected with a group of more than 150 national and local employers who have jobs in these certificate areas and have agreed to take a look at this job pool of people in this program. So it's a really great opportunity for us. These are some of the companies that are hiring in this area that Google has identified. This is not the extensive list, but these are companies that I was able to see that are either located here in the Boston area or which have offices in this area. So there's a lot of really great companies here that have good reputations, offer good benefits and things like that. And just finally, it really is exciting. It's bringing businesses, all the different community organizations together and the public schools. It's going to be a really, wonderful opportunity for people to, quickly jump into a more lucrative career path and maybe get themselves out of some challenging circumstances. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions? Go ahead, Mariah.
Michelle, this is really exciting. Thank you so much for letting us know about it. Can you just clarify? So I don't quite understand what BASE's role is in this. If the program's offered online, are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you just help me understand that a little bit better?
Sure, yeah. So it is, anybody can go to Coursera online and take these classes. It's a monthly fee of $49. And it generally, people can take as long as they want doing it that way to get the certification. So it could take them a couple of years. What they've done with us is partnered with BASE to pull in all of the different community organizations to offer it for free, so that they don't have to pay $49 a month. And it gives them a time period of 1 year to finish the coursework. We've already had phone calls from people who want to take multiple certification areas. So that could be an interesting problem for us to have to address, when it comes down to it, because I do anticipate that we will give out probably most of those, I'll call them slots, scholarship slots, where people don't have to, pay for those. And when I say people, I mean those people in those organizations that we're partnering with.
So BASE will essentially be the middleman organization to administer the 500 scholarships and basically give people some sort of access codes or whatever within the community. You'll vet the community members and then provide those access codes for them to get access to those.
Exactly. Yeah. My goal is to submit everything to Coursera and Google by the end of January, so that people can start their classes on February 1st and be done, if they do the 10 hours a week, be done at the end of the school year. So this would be good, for any of our students here in Brookline who may not be going to college, who might, need to work for the time being, and give them a leg up, and get a decent job when they're finished with the program.
And for people for whom the $10 is a impediment, you have waivers too for the registration fee?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Thanks. This is great.
Yeah, sure.
Any other questions or comments? Stephen and Valerie, I can't see you, so if you want to jump in, go ahead. Jennifer has a question. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Actually, it's not a question because it's one of my liaisons, so I don't have a question, but I do want to say thank you to Michelle for applying for this and for doing all the work to get this up and going and sort of administrating all of this. I think it's a really great opportunity for potentially our students, for community members. So I just want to say thank you, because it's a sort of an extra that she went for. So it's awesome. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that update. So it's very informative and we appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, so next up we have updates on FY23, FY24 budgets.
I'm just going to start talking while the slides come up. We talked about the FY 23 and 24 budgets at last week's, 2 weeks ago's finance meeting, a couple days before the new year. Last week, okay, was it? Thank you. It was in that time when days blend together. Exactly. So we did have a meeting and we talked about this. This was the updated town financial plan. These are the slides from the financial plan. The select board had their budget summit on December 15th, as you can see. And there's just 2 points I want to make from FY24. And before we get there, I just want to make sure that school committee has heard updates on FY23 too. There's 2 updates to provide from the fall town meeting. The first is that the budget was adjusted to, thank you, to the PSB budget was adjusted. There was an adjustment to the revenue for the town. And so the PSB budget was adjusted up by $515,000. The consequence of that is just to remind everyone, we have a significant one-time funds that our budget was built on this year. And so having the funds from the town will allow us to defer those funds to future years, which is helpful, particularly the ESSER funds. It means the ESSER funds, which were good for another 2 years, we can rely on those hopefully for future years. So that was helpful. So the 515 isn't necessarily extra money. It's already within what we've already allocated for our expenses. And then the other thing was that warrant article 37, which was the warrant article brought to town meeting regarding having an external consultant analyze the PSB budget and make recommendations to advisory committee, was rejected by town meeting by about 75 or 80% to 25 or 20%, something like that. But nonetheless, of course, as we all had talked about beforehand, we're certainly interested in looking at efficiencies. And as Dr. Guillory has mentioned, we're hopefully identifying a consultant. At our meeting last week, we talked about, or Dr. Guillory talked about, the challenges right now in the market of identifying, given sort of larger labor shortages, the difficulties in identifying people who have the particular skill set and experience to do this work. Nonetheless, he's continuing to pursue that. So that's sort of the 2 big FY23 updates I wanted to make sure everyone had. And then FY24, I'm just going to toggle through. There's 2 parts of these slides that I want to show. The first one's on slide. This isn't advancing anymore. It's stuck. Oh, there we go. It's the next one. Okay, so this is hard to read on the screen for me. This is when I start to feel my age, when I have no idea what that says. But if you look in the purple column, which is FY24, what I want to highlight is down at the bottom, you can see there's in the purple column, purple rows, there's a cumulative deficit. This is the first purple row of 8.2, I think, million. Thank you, Linus. You have younger eyes than I do, I guess. And that is about 10% town and just over or just under 7.4 million for schools deficit. And I just want to highlight, there was a initial projection provided by PSB, which you all received an email that went to the town, and then Linus forwarded it to you. And then this is revenue projections, and that red row is basically the difference between our expense projections and the town's revenue projections allocated to PSB into the town. So what you can see in the last row and in the next to last row is both the town and the schools are going to be in a deficit. And actually what I'm having a hard time giving you the total calculations on is it's the school's rate of deficit is actually less than the town's rate of deficit. So at the beginning, it's about 90% school deficit, 10% town deficit, and then by the end of the projection period, it goes to about 1/3 town, 2/3 schools. But either way, there's a significant deficit, and which speaks to certainly what I expect will be an override. I was hoping we would not need to have an override vote in May, but as I'm sure we all were, but the numbers certainly don't look like that will be the case. And so if we don't have a successful override vote, we'll certainly be in quite a challenge, which we'll be talking more about in the coming months. And then I just want to go ahead to, there's another slide here. I'm just going to go slow. Okay, this one. So what you see on the FY23 schools column, 125.6 million, that's this year's amount. Remember last spring we voted 125,000,098, blah, blah, blah. And then they added in the 515,000 at this November's town meeting. So that's the 125.6 million number. And so the new FY24 current town allocation, and again, this is preliminary as well, as we all know that the budget numbers change and there's a new governor and there'll be a new budget coming out, but the current projections are 127.3 for PSB. And I just want to highlight that that number is less than our current PSB expenses for this year. And so the current projection from the town for our expenses does not even meet our current expenditures. So we are, for the second time in 3 years, not even receiving the current amount of money that we need to run PSB. So as we said at finance, pretty gloomy financial news, but it's important that school committee is aware of where things are at least at this point in time. Anything I missed? No.
All right, thank you very much for that update. It is sobering indeed, but we'll get through it, I'm sure.
Does anyone have any questions or no?
Any questions, anyone?
Okay.
No? Go ahead, Suzanne.
Mariah, you're all things finance. So are we thinking, of course, that we may need 2 budgets going forward?
So I think that the plan that we've talked about for the budget book, and we actually talked about this at that meeting as well, or maybe it was the previous meeting. I'm sorry, they're all blending together in my mind. But basically, the budget book that's going to be put together by staff will reflect what is the appropriate budget, what is the the sound sort of appropriate academic budget for PSB, and separately, Dr. Guillory will put together a document articulating the consequences of not funding at that level. So rather than trying to develop 2 completely parallel budgets,
Okay.
and what that document that he develops looks like will be shared at the right time. But thinking about if it's specific programs or class size, much like we've talked about in previous years, right? Like if this happens, then we'll have to do this or we'll have to do that. So unfortunately, we've been
But we have to,
in this boat.
do we not
too
have to
much
go
recently.
with a number to
Right.
certainly town meeting?
Right, that's
Well-
what you're describing, Mariah, seems to be asking us to vote for the second year in a row to advance.
Third year in a row.
To advance a number that is higher than what the town has allocated to us.
Right, that's correct.
Because
we're
we'll-
voting-
the only number we'll be presented with is the sort of desired budget. We won't actually get a number for the, I mean, we
When
have
we
the,
vote,
have the allocation.
I should have added one other thing. When we vote February 15th, there won't even be a state budget at that point. The state budget's not going to be, and I believe with the new governor, we were told it's going to be delayed even a further week possibly so we probably won't see a state budget until early to mid-March. And so, and certainly with the new governor coming in, I would expect, and with the, what's the name of the new legislation, which I'm drawing a blank on?
Fair share amendment?
Fair share amendment, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of possibilities for what does it look like and how does our town budget change that we don't necessarily, that I don't think anyone has answers to right now whatsoever. And so certainly at this point, I would not be, I think that we should be voting in the February time, we're advancing the budget that we understand is the superintendent's recommended budget, and that we would then be, as we did last year, adjusting as we go along and seeing where the numbers come in on one side, where the numbers come in on the other side. And ultimately, like we did in the past 2 years, and like every other year, as far as I know, school committee has done, there's a final number revoted anyways before town meeting.
Mariah, I would also note you're accurate on the governor's budget being about mid-March. I don't recall the last time there was a new governor where we actually then had a final budget for July 1. Just with that timing. No, I'm just
Yeah.
with that timing, just so we might not know on July 1 either.
So I just think that in the absence of this certainty, I think the one thing that we should be doing as a school committee is setting a clear vision for, or I'll say endorsing the vision of Dr. Guillory of what is the appropriate funding level of the school system. And then if we don't receive that, what are the challenges that we as a school system are going to face? What are the things that are going to need to be cut?
But for that second option, I mean, to make it concrete, don't we actually have to have a hypothetical number that we do receive?
Not necessarily, because
There's a big difference between receiving $1 million less than what we're asking for and $5 million less than.
Well, I think the other challenge is that, so there's what Val just mentioned, and then there's the question of what the select board is going to put on the on an override vote. And so, there's we don't know, are they going to, I'm making this up, but imagine that we heard that there's a $7.3 million gap in the initial projections, and imagine that carries forward, but the select board decides to only put up $5 million. Well, that would be one choice, and so we'd know it right then, basically, possibly, that we have to eliminate $2.3 or $2.4 million right there. However, we also don't know what the state budget's going to come in at, and that might also come in at a higher number. And so there's going to be a lot of adjustments here that are going to come in, and then we're going to have to work through it. But I think that in my vision, and Linus and I haven't talked about this in detail, so this might not be Linus's vision, but I'll talk about it. What I see, the document that talks about where we might need to make cuts, it's not a binary of this or that. It's going to be, well, this might be if I had to triage, this would be the thing that I would do first, and I think it would save this much. And then if I have to keep going, this is the next thing I would do, and it would save this much. And if I have to keep going, this is the next thing I would do, and this is how much it would be. And so that way you're not cutting, you're not making a plan to cut $8 million worth of things if you really only need to cut $2 million worth of things.
Yeah, I mean, if you think it's feasible to slice it sort of in an instructive way like that, then that's fine, because that's just essentially a series of, a budget.
At this point, that's the way I'm thinking about it. And Linus, we haven't talked about it in that detail, so I don't know how that comports or doesn't comport with your thinking, but knowing what we know at this point in time, and knowing that the budget book needs to be prepared essentially in 3 weeks, and we're not going to have much more information in 3 weeks than we have now, I would expect that it will be something along those lines of if and when these decisions need to be made, this is what's going to happen and how we will make those choices.
I think that structurally this does make sense, especially this year where we do have so many variables, like the fair share amendment, how much money will come in from that, the override, which very likely will be on the ballot in May, how much money might come from that. And so to preemptively make an unnecessary level of proposed cuts, I don't think makes much sense, and certainly not for the well-being of the school districts. But by the same token, there is a universe under which we would have to stick with the current town appropriation. And so having that additional document or section, or the precise construction of which we're not 100% sure what that looks like, that'll be up to Dr. Guillory, but having that included or in tandem with the budget book will help inform the public about certain choices that they might have to make in terms of what an override versus a successful override versus a failed override, the impacts that would have on programming. And so as long as all that information is present, then I think that's an appropriate way to move forward.
We also have the Student Opportunity Act, don't we? That money should be kicking in. I don't know, that's the state. I don't know what that's going to look like. So Mariah, just as I'm thinking about
I
it,
just want to mention one thing though, which is I believe that that money is targeted towards underserved districts.
Only?
Principally. I don't know about only, but
Okay.
heavily weighted.
yeah.
And so that, anyways.
So, here's what I'm thinking. So we could either say we start with the high number and we list the things that we might have to cut, or we start with the lower number and we list the things we could add. Is that true? I mean, you could do it either way. I don't know which is, I don't know. which-
Except that it's really the higher number that reflects maintenance of current effort.
Right.
Right. So these aren't add-ons. This is just kind of to keep doing what we're doing. So
Exactly.
one really should be thinking of it in terms of removing stuff rather than adding.
Right. These aren't plus ups because there's other things that we have talked about and that are in our multi-year guidelines. For example, thinking about BEEP as a full day program.
Right.
That would be a true plus up. This is a maintenance of effort. We are at $7.3 million. That's a maintenance of effort budget.
Auntie?
I would just like to request, as somebody who, as a taxpayer who has been on the non-school committee side, that we be very, what's the word, judicious on how this is presented, like as much information as possible, as soon as possible. And it's not, because in the past, it's come across as a threat. You know, if you don't give us this money, then all of these programs are in jeopardy. And I don't know, I think that as a taxpayer, I took offense at that. So I'm just saying, I think if we could just be careful about how, I mean, it's just the facts. I mean, we're not, you know.
So Nancy, can I just ask how you would then represent that it is in fact a cut to maintenance of effort? I mean, to me, that's sort of a neutral statement of fact.
Yeah, it wasn't, in the past, Val, I feel like it wasn't presented that way. I feel like it was presented as, especially in the presence of an override, if you don't do this, then, you know, kiss your arts goodbye kind of a thing.
But that's, I mean, not about
That
those
might
words, but
be-
the fact is that in that, you know,
I
just
get it. Yeah,
like
I
you might say
know.
kiss your arts goodbye, but reality is if that's what the program is that's in jeopardy, that's the program that's in jeopardy.
Yeah,
So
no,
I don't know if
get
it's a
it.
question of the words or their perception. People might not like to hear that there's specific programs, but that's the point.
Yeah, no,
Like-
no, I get it. No,
That's
I'm
what we're
just-
talking about.
I do,
So-
and I understand that. I do understand that. I'm just saying, as much information as possible to the community as to what's coming up. And then this is just kind of like where we are, you know, we're at a deficit here, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
In
I
order
mean, I
to,
think
you
it's
know,
really important.
it's not anybody's fault. It's just, you know, we're looking at the numbers and we're trying to do what we can, and the numbers move. They do. We understand that. But this is the kind of a reality that we might be looking at. I mean, I think that might be a little bit more palatable than how it was presented a while ago.
I look forward to you
Yeah, we'll work,
guiding that communication.
we'll work on it.
Well, in terms of the overall tenor of it, I think this year it will actually be easier than usual because of the Fair Share Amendment. So it's not necessarily going to come across as we absolutely need more money from the town. What's wrong with you, town? Because a lot of these extra monies we're talking about would be coming from different sources. Well, obviously an override is by the taxpayers, but Fair Share Amendment also by the taxpayers, but not directly by the town.
One
Oh,
thing I just want to
wanna say
add
we
to
hope-
that. Oh,
Sorry, I was just gonna say on fair share, we really need, and I know that Suzanne, thank you for putting this in our ask document to the legislature. There's nothing in what was voted on by the electorate that actually says that money can't be used to simply supplant other
Yeah.
and just replace other funds that the state's allocated. So we, along with every other school committee, district, and town in the Commonwealth, really needs to push on that being extra money and not simply replacing other general fund money.
and I just want to add one thing on about that, state aid. So if you look here, apologies, I'm like, is the screen blurry or is my vision blurry? So just to that point, I mean, I'm sure everyone's aware of the fact that for people who paid state income tax this past year. It was a record year and funds were returned. But nonetheless, there's certainly municipalities all across the Commonwealth are really, really stressed right now. We heard about that, Linus. You mentioned it last week, and your superintendents talking to each other. And certainly, this has been something that's come from the town side as well as municipalities. And so, to what extent municipalities are going to be through MMA and other venues lobbying for increases from the state in state aid during this new administration coming in, because the increase here is small, is definitely small, especially when we know about what we know about how the state is doing in terms of its own revenues. And so hopefully also this would be an opportunity for further revenues to come in addition, just like what you said, Val, about not just having the fair share just be supplanting, but really what they should be doing in general for municipal aid.
All right, anyone else? Okay, thank you very much for that update. It's obviously going to continue to be a work in progress, very dynamic situation. So we now move to subcommittee and liaison reports. Jennifer, curriculum?
We met on December 20th. We approved the minutes from October, and then we had a discussion on BHS athletics. We had quite a lengthy conversation. There's an interest in doing a review of the athletics program. There are some policy pieces, so I'm going to be working with David on a possibility of looking at some of our policies around some of our athletics. I've reached out to Mariah to talk about discussing some of this in a joint finance curriculum meeting, specifically around student activity accounts and some of the challenges there. We talked, it's pretty complex for a short update to in sort of this format here when we're doing liaison reports. The whole meeting was recorded, and I think we're going to come back to this discussion. But there are, we have Kyle's coming into this position and is sort of looking at this, coming in and sort of looking at how the program is. We have 43 sports that we run, and we have 92 teams. We have one director. I think there's some budgetary implications around this regarding supervision. There's a long list of things that we sort of need to look at, and a review would give us a lot of information in which to make financial decisions, programming decisions. And so I think it's a larger conversation, but timely and important. There's a lot of different components to this, connections with wellness and supervision and our athletic program and how that works with our wellness credits. And so I think we'll be continuing to have those discussions, but there is definitely interest in having a review. The second part of our meeting was discussing what reviews are currently in play. So just to review, and this list is available. We talked a little bit about how we run reviews. And so historically reviews were run within OTL when we had a different structure for administration within OTL, within the Office of Teaching and Learning. And so there has been a lot of use of consultants, which gives us added capacity for specific projects. And we can select groups, or the district can select groups with specialities in certain areas. And I'll give an example of that. And that the RFP process has actually been enlightening for the district in sort of seeing what different groups are, have strengths in being able to support our work in a review process. We are currently, just to give a really quick update, our reviews right now, we have a middle school review that's ongoing. That review really started about May of 22, and we anticipate that we'll be getting the first round of information in March of this year. So we'll come back to the full committee with a report, an initial report. And that's really sort of what we would consider like a stage 2 right now. They're in a discovery process. So if we consider stage 1, the RFP process, stage 2, a discovery process, the third stage rather being sort of what we would call a design process, and then 4, implementation. This piece of middle school review information is really a discovery process right now, gathering lots of information and analyzing information. That's being run in collaboration with New Solutions. That's our consultant for that, using some Title I, Title IV, and IDEA monies. We have a social studies curriculum review for materials with the new teacher center, and that's looking curriculum review for racial equity and cultural responsiveness in our 6 through 12 curriculum. That's funded in partnership with METCO, and that started in April of 22. We have already had a report out to full school committee on December 15th about our child study teams and our RTI. K-12, that's through the new teacher center. And part of that work was a result of the findings on disproportionality, but also an interest in really understanding and clarifying our CST and RTI process. That started in July of 22, and we anticipate a completion around December of 22, it just passed. Again, the funding there through IDEA. We also had a report to full school committee this past fall on our English learner education program, and there was an evaluation and the findings were shared, and that's K-12. And that went from about April to September of this past year using Title II funding. And that's part of DESE and progress monitoring review. And we also have a sex ed and health curriculum, our introduction to adolescence, the 5th grade curriculum. We're working with a group called Partners in Sex Ed, and that just began in December, and we anticipate that going through like June of 24. And that's being funded by the general fund, and that's more specific in its scope. We are considering or trying to work on an ELA program and materials review, which would be K-8. That is start and end date is to be determined, which would be funded through hopefully some combination of general fund and Title I funding. The next step for that is to put out an RFP. Michelle Herman is going to lead that work, I believe, and is anticipating a March 23 date for the RFP to be organized. Sorry, this is longer than my normal, but I'm trying to share information in a timely manner. And then we're looking at hopefully some sort of athletic program review, which would be a 9 through 12. And that, again, start, end date, and funding mechanism is to be determined. There is no earmarked funding source for that right now. So one of the things that Leslie Ryan Miller mentioned was that there's still a need to develop a schedule of program reviews to project out, and that work is still needs to be ongoing. I think there was some good discussion about what our capacity is to run these, and how difficult that is right now, and how much time and work that takes, and the benefit of using some consultants to do some of this project-based work. And I think that's everything from that meeting. We will be meeting in January. I think it's the 17th. Sorry, I just want to know for sure. We're going to be meeting in January. We'll be talking about high school course changes, and then we'll be making some votes on recommendations to share with you. And then, yes, Tuesday the 17th, and then on the 19th, it will come to full school committee for approval. And that timeline is important so that the information can get into the high school course catalog in time. So we do need to vote those course changes. Any questions?
I've got a couple actually. So for
I'm not Leslie Ryan Miller, but I'm going to do my best.
We've been hearing a little bit about the proposed introduction of AP English. Is that going to come up in this?
So I don't have a proposal in front of me to respond to that. I know that there's been ongoing communication with Anthony and Hal and the Office of Teaching and Learning and the curriculum coordinators and high school staff. So I don't have the list of proposals. So I have a meeting scheduled with the Office of Teaching and Learning to review those prior, just to get the agenda set and have a better idea of how many course changes we'll be looking at. So I do not technically have a proposal in front of us to respond to about an AP English class, although I'm aware of the concerns and conversation about that as our staff. So we'll know more when we get to the curriculum meeting and the agenda set what those classes are. Typically we would list those when we have the agenda set. Those courses would be listed. So we'll have more information next week.
My other question was in your rundown of program reviews, I didn't catch world language, and I thought that that was in the pipeline. Did I miss it?
So I brought up that question, but that's not on the OTL timeline right now. There's no budget, there's no resources for that. So unless there are other changes that I am not aware of.
All right.
So I did ask about it.
Okay, thank you.
So if we're interested, just to respond to that, if we're interested in doing that, I think that we need to figure out how that, the district would need to figure out how that would work. Who would run it? Where's the funding? What's the scope and a timeline for that? Because there's not either of those set out yet, unless Dr. Guillory has other information that I don't have.
I think I'll check back in with Michelle and Gabe, because I thought at one point there were talks of using Title I funding for it at one point. We discussed it earlier, so I'll circle back to the team on that.
Stephen?
Hi, who's leading the Office of Teaching and Learning?
Well, maybe I'll let Dr. Guillory respond to that.
I'll be sharing that information out next week.
Okay.
Anyone else have questions for Jennifer before we move on? Go ahead.
Jen, in my wallet is a Post-it note that is all about PE, including, or athletics, I should say, including some of the things you talked about and some other things. And I'm excited to talk more about it and detangle some of these questions that also cross over into issues of like equity, gender equity, and other equity issues. So,
and I think that when Kyle came and talked about sort of these like higher, sort of looking at it from a high level and looking at what are some of the challenges, some of the benefits and strengths are also some of our challenges. And so I think we just need to I agree. So Kyle and Office of Teaching and Learning were like, this is something that they're wanting. And I agree. I think that there are a number of people at the subcommittee meeting who agreed that that this was important. And there's a lot of, we need to look at it and see what's working, what's not, what can we do better, what do we need to work on. So I do think that it seemed to me that Kyle will need some support, whether that's and I'm hoping for like next year that we can put into the budget, an assistant director. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not asking. I'm just saying I would be supportive of doing that so that there's more. They'll need more staff. That when you look at Kyle's numbers, the increase we've had in student participation, and there's all of these pieces about gender and equity and coaches and stipends. Like it's very complex. It's complex.
All right, thank you for that, Jennifer. That brings us to Valerie, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice.
Sure. So there's actually no update since our December 15th meeting. We haven't met since then, but I will just speak briefly to Driscoll. The building project marches on. We're still on target for mid-September completion for the new school building with a demolition and play space area to follow. We are looking tomorrow at a mock-up of a classroom. So if anybody's interested in meeting at 7:50 at Driscoll in the morning to see a mock-up of a classroom, you can join me and Matt and others from Gilbane in that tour of a mock-up.
Jennifer?
Valerie, I will not be able to join and I would love to. Is there a way to maybe share some photos when you go?
Sure.
That would be really cool. That's exciting and I would love to see that, but I know that I'll need to be at work soon. So
not a problem.
Awesome.
All right, Mariah, anything further on finance?
No, I feel like I've covered finance for now. Just everyone should get ready because there'll be a lot of extra finance. We're getting into finance season, so there'll be lots of extra meetings like in previous years. And I just wanted to mention that the warrant, I won't present tonight. We'll just do it another night.
Okay.
Thanks.
Suzanne, government relations?
Well, I just want to announce that we are not having our meeting with the legislators on Monday. We are not. Three of them cannot attend because the Speaker of the House is requesting their presence at a meeting, and he pulls rank over us. So, so anyway, we're going to wait and hear from Tommy Vitolo about when they might be available. So he's going to let David know and give us some dates. Is that right, David?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so policy next meets January 23rd. I'm going to be inviting principal, the Heath School principal to come and talk a bit about the name change process at Heath. And should be. Are there any additional liaison updates? All right, seeing none. Any new business? Go ahead, Jennifer.
I'm just going to throw it out there, and I haven't brought this up before, but I'm getting a lot of interest from students at the high school about vaping at the high school. So I'm just going to. Oh, sorry. No, let me reword that. Interest in discussing. I missed an important word there. Not interest in participating, actually frustration. And so I just want to throw that out there and see if we can get some, maybe perhaps Dr. Guillory could update us at a future meeting, or we could have conversation about what is, vaping in the bathrooms and supervision. Like, it's an ongoing, we've had this conversation before, but it's ongoing and multiple sources of students. And so although I encourage students to work through the high school steps in an appropriate manner, it's so frequent lately that I just wanted to throw that out there.
Nancy?
I too am getting lots of feedback from parents about concerns around not just vaping, but hot smoke coming from the ground.
I'm going to turn on your mic, Nancy.
What?
I'm going to turn on your mic.
Sorry. I was just saying that since Jennifer brought it up, I'm gonna say something too, and that I too am getting lots of feedback from parents about concerns, and kids about concerns, not just around vaping, but around hot smoke from bathrooms and in the grounds, and what is school committee doing about it? And so I don't really have something to say. So, as long as we're talking about it, if there is a conversation, if we could just kind of add that to the discussion board.
Go ahead.
At one point, and I imagine it's still happening, there were surveys about drug and alcohol use at the high school being administered annually. Are those still happening? Okay. Yeah, youth risk rate. That sounds right. Is that reported to school committee, or do we have access to?
I don't know that it was done last year.
Okay.
Segal, the Department of Health Director, reached out to me about signing an MOA that will allow that to happen again.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't believe that it happened last year. But
Because I've also heard comments recently about use at the high school, drug use at the high school, and I am curious whether it actually represents a change in pattern from past practice, or or not, or just talking about it differently. Social media makes people more aware of things, you know. So I would be really interested in knowing what's going on with data.
All right, and then just one other item under new business, since we're on the subject of what we're hearing from members of the community. There's some people who've been reaching out to me about next steps on the sustainability policy. So we passed the sustainability policy in the fall, and they'd like to know what's the timeline, what steps are being taken, what's the structure around it. So that's just something else that we should be thinking about moving forward. Anyone else? All right, then that concludes the open session for this evening. I am going to move that we meet in executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, for Purpose 7, to review and approve executive session minutes from the meeting on December 15th, 2022. And that's the sole purpose, so hopefully this will be a record-fast executive session. Is there a second? All right, thank you, Mariah, for your vote. Suzanne?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Mariah? Andy?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes, and will we be returning to open session or
We will
be
not
adjourning?
be, we will not be returning to open session. Stephen? Yes. Valerie?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. So good night to those of you in the public who may still be watching. And for us, it'll be nice and quick.
Recording stopped.